I'll open the regular council meeting, 1565 for July 12th. Might as well do it twice in
What's
honor
the
of
sound
the.
on? I can't hear anything.
Can't hear me?
Can you hear us, Ryan?
I can't hear you.
Can you hear us now? Yep.
Can you hear us? Don't know. Can you hear us now?
Now I hear.
There you go. Okay.
So that wasn't on my end?
Sure. In honor of the Leeward the Village of Pemberton acknowledges that we are meeting within the unceded territory of the Leeward Nation. Motion to go in camera, please. Councilor Craddock, seconded by Councilor Zant. Any opposed? Motion carries. I'm going to call to order Committee of the Whole number 232 for July 12th. And in honor of the Leeward, the Village of Pemberton acknowledges that we are meeting within the unceded territory of the Leeward Nation. Those members of the public in attendance, please note, please note that this meeting is a live webinar and being recorded. Recording the meeting will be available on the village's website following the meeting. Any changes to the agenda? None. Motion to approve. Councilor Craddock, seconded by Councilor Noble. Any opposed? Motion carries. Approval of the minutes from Committee of the Whole 231 from Tuesday, June 21st, moved by Councilor Craddock, seconded by Councilor Noble. Any opposed? Motion carries. That takes us right into number 4. Our delegations, and we have some from the RCMP joining us. For coming, you guys, we appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
It feels the hybrid approach here. Hello, Councilor Zant and Councilor Noble on there, and Gwendolyn, who I believe is that you? Wow, I was like, I think that's you, but I'm not 100% certain. So thank you for having us, and obviously on the traditional territories of the Leeward Nation. Thank you so much to the council members and to our new CAO, Elizabeth, for joining us here today. I believe I'm screen sharing with you guys. So we're just here to do a wrap up of the Pemberton 2021 year end, and Corporal Langtree will be joining us. He's just coming in from a call. So we're just going to get started to ensure that we're running on time here. So this is a very similar format to what was presented last year to you. We didn't want to change too much. We want to try and streamline some of the year end presentations. We're obviously a little bit late in the game. This year, we were struggling to get some statistics that were relevant to Pemberton Village specifically. So I'm going to start off with the statistics for Pemberton. And these are Pemberton municipality statistics. So they do not incorporate the Swamp Silhouette Regional District, of which is an area that we service as well. So obviously, I'm looking forward to the winter, as you can see on there. This is a beautiful shot. That was actually an incredible day in Pemberton in front of the detachment, nicely covered in snow in comparison to the 31 degrees that we have outside and inside today. So this is just a sort of a viewpoint of the Pemberton RCMP team leaders. It's changed a little bit since last year. Oh, and there is Corporal Langtree.
My apologies for being late. Welcome. Thank you. In the hot seat, my friend. Again,
Hot seat.
I was just in the hot seat.
So the dynamic of Pemberton has changed a little bit since we presented last year. Obviously, we have the Pemberton Senior Operations NCO is now helmed by Corporal Scott Langtree, of most of you know, and well loved in the community for sure. And then myself, I've changed from an acting staff sergeant to a staff sergeant now in charge of the North Zone, which incorporates Whistler and Pemberton RCMP. And then we have our inspector, who I believe was here last year when we did the year-end presentation, Robert Dykstra, but he's now 1 year into his tenure. And then we still have Jeff Shore as the sergeant that's in charge of the GIS team. And your administrative manager is still Amanda Daly, and the Pemberton admin manager is Julie Schaefer. All right, so we're gonna start a little bit opposite to what we kind of did last time this presentation was given out. And we're gonna talk about the crime statistics. As you're gonna see, a lot of what's coming in the crime statistics, there has actually been quite a heavy reduction in crime for the last from 2020 to 2021. These statistics actually only incorporate a 2-year period. The pandemic years are unlike any other years that we have. So we thought comparing 2021 statistics to anything that was 2019 and prior was sort of irrelevant and probably not noteworthy. That we will definitely have something more next year when it comes to looking at the 2022 stats as coming out of the pandemic, or according to the news, heading back into it again. And what that's going to look like. So here's just a grab of sort of some of the annual crime statistics when we come to talking about violent crime. In general, there's been actually quite a large reduction in assaults within Pemberton. And like I said, these are Pemberton municipality statistics. So you're actually having a 50% reduction going from 41 assaults to 21 assaults within the year, which is a marked difference, as well as a reduction in domestic violence. But you are seeing that increases in sexual assault from 4 to 6, which is a 50% increase. But mark that those numbers are only a two item difference. But in general, sexual offenses, you are seeing a decrease of 44%. So sexual offenses could incorporate anything from indecent exposure to sexual interference and those kind of categories that would incorporate child offenses and adult offenses of a sexual nature. When you are seeing some of those increases, we are seeing increases in property crime, but yet again, when you're incorporating Pemberton statistics, the numbers are quite low in general, even though you're seeing a marked increase. So auto theft, you're going from, that's the theft of an actual vehicle, from 1 to 3, and therefore you're seeing a 200% increase in auto theft. And then you're also seeing that increase in frauds in that category. And I think that's something that has been a general trend coming out of the pandemic, that you were seeing some of those increases in frauds that were going around, whether it be because people were online a lot more and they were isolated a lot more, and they were seeing some of that. We're seeing that really across the board, and no matter what municipality that you're in. And just, you know, the theft from vehicles, you're going from 3 to 6. And shoplifting, you're seeing that increase as well. But we're looking at decreases in quite a considerable amount of those categories. And where we are seeing increases, it's only from going from maybe 1 to 2 cases. So the other criminal code offenses that we thought relevant to talk about were sort of the ones that would not necessarily fit into one type of category, whether it be violent crime or person crime. But that, you know, liquor, intoxicated in a public place, we were seeing a decrease from 2020 to 2021. But we are seeing a 27% increase in missing persons. And we're seeing an increase in cause disturbance. So that could be somebody that's just outside yelling and screaming, but you're only seeing an increase of 2 cases in that category. And as you can see on here, we're seeing a decrease in the Pemberton area of mental health flags. So a call that may have had a mental health component to it of 33%. Motor vehicle incidents. I know this has been a hot button topic. Whistler was quite interested in motor vehicle incidents, and there's no doubt, given the Duffy over the past year, that there has been an increase in motor vehicle incidents. So these could be collisions, fatal, non-fatal, and collisions combined. We're seeing an increase across the board in that, except for fatal collisions. We did not have any in the 2021 year. But the collisions all around are certainly up, and I certainly do think that's the weather was in the winter of 2021 was pretty hairy at times, and just the increase in traffic on our roadways coming into the Pemberton area. But we do have an increase in impaired operation of a motor vehicle by 35%. So this just gives you, you know, there's obviously the in-depth statistics, but this just gives you an overview of CDSA offenses would be drug offenses. We are not having any change in that. Federal statute offenses, you're just seeing an increase of 4 to 6. Other criminal code, other occurrences, this is just to give you a bit of an idea about things. But I think the biggest ones on here is that you have a reduction in violent crime, but you have an increase in property crime within the community. And the calls for service, they were roughly around the same, which I think is always a surprising thing when you look at those 2 years, is that, and this is within Pemberton municipality, you're not really seeing much difference in call volumes that are coming into the community, even though you were in a pandemic, and this actually hasn't changed too much from 2019 either. So even though we had sort of shutdowns and decrease of people, and then we had those increases, we're not actually seeing a decrease in the calls for service for the Pemberton members that are attending to the area. But one thing we did want to take note of, and I know this has been sort of a topic of focus, not only for us, but Vancouver Coastal Health, as well as the Village of Pemberton and most jurisdictions around the country, is the mental health calls for service. So even though these numbers are Whistler and Pemberton combined, I do think it's relevant to talk about the fact that when you look at the top number being mental health occurrences, so these are calls that incorporate a mental health component to it, we are seeing these numbers are increased from the prior years, even though there's a slight decrease from 2020 to 2021. We are seeing a larger call volume in these years than we have in years past. As well as when you look at, and I think most notable is mental health apprehensions. So that's when the individual is in such a crisis moment that somebody is exhibiting a risk to themselves or to others, and the police officers are required to be put in a position of where they're apprehending an individual under the Mental Health Act and then taking them to a care provider that can provide them with support and services, that being at the Pemberton Health Clinic or at Lionsgate Hospital in North Vancouver. And you're seeing these as being 47% of our mental health occurrences. We are required to be in a position of putting someone under an apprehension. So that means they're in such a serious mode of crisis that they're an immediate risk to themselves or to others. So that's a large percentage of our mental health calls. Of that 289 and 274, of almost 50% of those are required for our team to engage that individual in an apprehension. And that requires an extensive period of time when it comes to making sure their needs are met, calling an ambulance if need be, transporting to the Pemberton Clinic to be assessed by a physician, waiting with them at that stage of the game. And if there's not certification done, often we will be the team that is the security to an extent, waiting for that individual either to be transported by BC ambulance, or we are in a position of where we are required to transport all the way to Lionsgate and then wait for a triage system down there. So often these calls, when you think about it, in 2021, our team attended to 129 of these. On average, these calls at the minimum are 3 hours. And then at the maximum, you're looking sometimes up to 15 hours for these calls for a member to have contact or called out to that call, to being back within the community, being able to provide that service to Pemberton. So definitely something that is on our radar. And there's no doubt that mental health has been a concern for a long period of time. And I don't think it's a secret to anybody that the pandemic has certainly been a catalyst of making this more at the forefront of which is where it needs to be. So we're just going to go a little bit into our annual sort of strategic plan. These are very similar to what we have done over the years. So this is just an idea of the guiding principles and priorities and the context and challenges when it comes to Pemberton specifically. You talk about that ever-changing population due to tourist influx and when that comes in, and when those shoulder seasons are, when those busy seasons are, and the additional roles that are really required by Pemberton, especially when it comes to mental health calls, of which we transition from being police officers to security to mental health workers and so on and so forth. And as well, emergency and disaster response. This area certainly had its time with the atmospheric rivers and landslides and mudslides. Scott and his team attended to a number of these things when it came to evacuation orders or alerts. And it was some scary times in November, and it led to some working groups that were required to try and address some of the issues that were really putting Scott and his team in places of which they felt unsafe. So that's certainly something that's at the forefront when it comes to planning for our team in Pemberton and making sure that they're supported in every capacity that they need. So we have 5 strategic priorities that we redid the strategic plan this past year. And we now have 5 categories instead of 4. and we're gonna go over those. This is actually a picture that was taken by Constable Wes Russell when it came to sort of the roadways, and they were going out there with a sunny day, and it was winter conditions in the sense that we had just had snowfall, but it was sunny. And by the time Constable Russell got out there, this is what he's looking at as he stops to look at the avalanche gates that are there. So we're going to talk about crime reduction and community safety first. Sergeant Jeff Shore, who's in charge of our general investigation section, is obviously in charge of this category. This is Corporal Nathan Miller's training on the boat. He does come up here to do quite a lot of work in Anderson Lake. And that is really what he was on this boat for, to try and make sure that he was available and able to come up to the community to provide that water boat resourcing when needed. So we talk about crime reduction and safety as being an increased intelligence-led policing. We've talked about this for a couple of years, where we're advocating to get a Sea to Sky crime analyst to provide us with timely statistics, to provide us with the ability to be an innovative and modern police agency where we delegate our police resources where needed, rather than just roaming around in the old patrol type category. We're talking about, and we've talked about this last year as well, with the support and the development of the Sea to Sky North Community Response Unit. Part of that would be providing a service to Pemberton as well as to Whistler. So if you have a situation where there's an extensive amount of issues with traffic coming into the community, they could be brought into the community to do sort of traffic blitzes where BC Highway Patrol is unable to be here. Or if we have music festivals here, which, I'm sure that's coming back. We all know there's those off the grid ones that tend to occur on Crown land. Rodeos, things like that. They would certainly also be able to tackle any property crime issues that we're seeing an extensive amount of theft from vehicles. They would help to be able to target something like that. And we talk about these databases to just help us do, yet again, that intelligence-led policing and operational planning for high volume weekends. Scott is no doubt on top of a lot of this when it comes to that proactive enforcement initiatives, making sure that we're engaged with our partner agencies. I know this is something that Scott has worked heavily on, and he engages with me all the time on this, of how he's making those connections and how he's creating a policing model that is in the best interest of the Pemberton community. So part of the parcel of enforcement is also education and prevention. So we talk about training days. It's been part of my mandate as the North Zone commander to make sure that we're providing those in-house policing things. So my team here needs to be on the bikes, because that's part of being a police officer in Pemberton, and they need to be on the snowmobiles, because that's part of being a police officer in Pemberton, is being in those areas of where the community members go, or they come through, or the tourist population is in that. And Scott has taken helm of that. He became a snowmobile instructor this year for training our team on how to be on the snowmobiles as a police officer, and that avalanche training. So we actually have secured a training facility with the Resort Municipality of Whistler at the Alta Vista Works Yard to make sure that we're able to provide that. And we use the Pemberton Range for our, obviously, our shooting training. So we talk about the youth. Obviously, youth is super important to us, and making sure that we have that connection and that collaboration with the youth. Scott and his team have taken schools within the community of Pemberton and just outside of the community. They make regular attendance. I believe, Scott, this is one of your attendance to maybe a kindergarten grade 1 class.
I think they came to visit us.
They came to visit you. There you go. So this is all the lovely little mini Santa Claus and elves coming to visit our team. And this is something that I know Scott holds in his heart, of being making sure that this is something that we're doing. Our team just did a bike rodeo here about a month and a half ago, just before school finished out. And I know that Inspector Dexter was at that bike rodeo. It's invaluable, these type of events that we attend to. And community holidays, you will have seen our team out there a lot more in this past year, even during COVID. So next, we're going to talk about road safety. This is a Butte picture, I believe, from one of the Ministry of Transportation guides of the Duffy. So this is, we talk about the hot brakes coming off the Duffy. That's this past year, we tried to do a lot of media around that, of if you sit on your brakes the entire time coming down the Duffy, you may not have any brakes left at the end. We were actually seeing brakes that were red because they were so hot. They had turned into molten at that stage of the game. So this is just a picture, and I think it really says it all about what transpired sort of at the end of that 2021 going into 2022 of the snowfalls and the record temperatures, the cold, and sort of the issues that we were still facing when the 99 was one of the only ways to get from here to the interior, and what that meant to the Pemberton community and surrounding area. So at the top, you see our BC Highway Patrol members conducting tire checks. This is something that they do on a regular basis. And even though you may not see us doing roadblocks for this all the time, if there are traffic stops, every member will check the tires if it's within that winter tire season to make sure that people are driving with the appropriate tires. So we talk about documented traffic enforcement, offense-specific focus, whether it be distracted driving, whether it be impaired driving, whether it be driving too fast for conditions, which, to be honest with you, is probably the majority of issues that we see on the highway. It's not because someone doesn't have the adequate tires, even if it's all season tires. It's just because people drive either too fast for the conditions or they just don't know how to drive within the conditions within the community. We also had seasonal policing initiatives with our partners when it came to road safety with Pemberton bylaw, which I know has struggled a little bit, but we certainly, I know Scott and his team tried to pick up where they were unable to, and working with BC Parks, particularly Joffrey Lakes, and trying to streamline what their visitor user management plan actually looks like and where they stop when we begin, and or how we can collaborate and work in partnership with them, particularly dealing with parking issues there. So we're talking obviously the development. I know that BCHP did look into serious fatalities or motor vehicle incidents that were happening, particularly on Highway 99 in the Pemberton area. And sort of if we were seeing any hot button zones that maybe we needed to address on a more regular basis with the BC Highway Patrol. We also started a focus working group, particularly dealing with Pemberton. So BC Highway Patrol, Ministry of Transportation, Miller Capilano, the Avalanche team, Michael Blanchard was really instrumental in that. And then working with Dawson Roads from the other side of Lillooet. And then myself, and just making sure that we met almost on there was one point where we were meeting daily for 4 weeks. And that includes Saturdays and Sundays, talking about where I needed to provide information from Scott and his team and where they needed to provide information to me and how we could best make those highways safe for people coming through. And what that looked like when Highway 99 was that only corridor to the interior after the atmospheric rivers and the mudslides all over the lower mainland. And then we talk about education and prevention and increasing training and establishing protocols for social media and police presence in certain areas. Social media is a tough thing when we don't have a media liaison officer within the Sea to Sky. It's sort of done whether or not I have time, and one of my corporals in Whistler has time, but it's very difficult to maintain that on a regular basis unless you have actually someone designated to do so. So we talk about operational excellence and emergency preparedness. This is at the heart of Staff Sergeant Gareth Bradley. If you don't know him, he's a staff sergeant in charge of the Squamish and Bowen Island detachments. And this is his bread and butter. He loves to do this stuff. And we are of the understanding that as our own police agency, we need to be better at this. And there's no doubt that Scott and myself have noted that, we need to work with the SLRD more and the Pemberton, Village of Pemberton and EMBC on how these rollouts occur and where we are short on information and where we need to gain that. So these pictures, one of them is actually of the Duffy slide, two of them actually, and then obviously where Pemberton Search and Rescue comes into place when we need them. If you don't know, I'm sure you do, but Pemberton Search and Rescue actually does provide support to the Lillooet area for search and rescues. They do have a team out there, but they are sort of the helm team that assists David McKenzie and his team out there. So, 2021 was an interesting year with the record-breaking search and rescue calls and RCMP callouts for the backcountry assistance. We had the lovely heat dome of the 2021 year, which I believe temperatures in Pemberton probably reached between 40 and 45 degrees. I think you guys were probably the hottest out of the corridor because Pemberton tends to be a bit of that heat box. And then, on the back of that, we ended up having the incessant rains and snow which ended up obviously in the mudslides on Reed Road in Birkin, and the eventual ones on the Duffy that washed out that part of the highway for a period of time and unfortunately took 5 lives. So part of the mandate when it came to sort of looking at where our gaps are is that myself and Scott and Inspector Dykstra work heavily on identifying what partners would be beneficial for us to be a more effective police agency. And so we identified SAR liaisons, not only in Whistler, but in Pemberton, and Logan Balmer is the SAR liaison for the Pemberton area that would work with David McKenzie and his team, doing some training with them and understanding and creating that communication or filling those communication gaps that we may have. And we ended up having meetings. Scott ended up working heavily with the SLRD on some meetings where we ended up having a much larger meeting than we thought at the end in regards to sort of the SLRD's expectations of us as a police agency when it came to evacuation orders and alerts and then orders and then alerts and then what that safety protocol looks like, whether their information they're providing to us are up to date or not. We were finding there were some gaps in some of that information that was being provided to us to the point where we organized for Air 5 to come up here, and Scott and his team went up to try and make sure that we got photos of our own to get an idea of the landscape of not only Pemberton, but surrounding areas, so that if we do have to attend to them for any emergency operational planning, that we have that information at our disposal if need be. Partners for Social Impact. So this is actually the bike rodeo, I believe, that they attended to. So this is great. This is really, I call it our bucket filling moments. This is how our team bucket fills, right? We're often on the opposite side where we're attending to the worst day of people's lives. And this is an opportunity for us to sort of engage with the kids in a different mandate. And it's something that I know Scott is super passionate about, and his team is certainly absorbing that passion of his, and these kids were super excited to have us for the day.
You built some of the ramps for that. Yeah, that's the fun
Yes.
ramp that the kids were going
I
to
had
have.
a little extra wood.
Yes.
I just built a house, I had some extra wood.
So we talk about this, this is sort of, when it comes to me actually being the pillar owner of this, this is really at the core of where I think policing should be heading, and where we really sort of feel that effectiveness. We can't do this job alone. And we need to just really understand where we can gain that support with our partners, where we can provide those bucket filling opportunities for our members, and what we should really look like as a policing agency. So Scott and his team did an excellent job on increasing those proactive patrols. He was out there constantly on the sleds and doing that training. Those bike patrols and those boat patrols certainly vital to make it look like the police officers of Pemberton are representing the community of which they serve. So you have a Cops for Cancer event for local riders. Obviously, Constable Jessica Munha is your local rider here, and your community of Pemberton has rallied around her. And I couldn't be more proud to see what I see when it comes to the village of really sort of taking her under their wing and just doing an incredible event to support her ride. It's been heartwarming to see, and I know Scott and his team worked heavily with Jessica to get the Legion event that was held a couple of weeks ago. It was so nice to be at that and see that small town policing type where everybody's there. And it was a real highlight of the last year for me, for sure, to see the type of model that Scott's created, and how I'm super proud of sort of the team that he's built here. But, you know, and he can probably talk about this a little bit more than I can, but they did work with the Lions Club on a Christmas tree event. They were present at the 24-hour run for, I'm not sure what this gentleman's name is, but he came to the Pemberton community to talk about mental health, and then Remembrance Day, the Creme de Cruiser that Constable Darian Silva did to raise funds and toys and food for the food bank, and working with Pemberton Wildlife. So these are initiatives of which Scott has at the heart of what he does, and he does it really, really well. And he's certainly created that family dynamic. And then we obviously have a few things to develop. We're not perfect, and we certainly know that we have places that we need to go with restorative justice and continuing work with the Pemberton community for those who are vulnerable within Pemberton. So there you go. There's Constable Darian Silva, who at Christmas time around the holiday season ended up filling, I think, 2 police cars.
A lot of stuff.
A lot of cars. So
Very generous.
Yes, small communities. I've policed in them before. I just find them the most incredibly generous people to support, particularly at this time. So I did a great job with that. So we talk about, this is Inspector Dexter's category of where we're looking at, performance management recognition of our members when they're doing incredible jobs. We have a regimental walk-in that's happening in Whistler in September. That is for the entire State of Skye. And we're also navigating through the first collective agreement with our members and what that looks like, and what that looks like for us as senior managers, as well as what that looks like for our team on the ground, and what that looks like for the Village of Pemberton and how that affects you. And then at the most forefront really is our employee health and wellness, and how that looks and what we can do and how we can modernize that and use innovation, of which is within our helm, to make sure that our team is healthy and they're happy, and that at the end of their time with the RCMP, that they have valuable, fruitful lives at the end, that we've given them the tools to increase their resiliency and been supportive in any capacity that we can. So we talk about the yearly wellness checks where we have designated psychologists and therapists within the corridor that our members can attend to at any point in time, and we have on speed dial if we need. And talking about recognizing the signs of workplace fatigue and stressors. We are not immune to this. This has been, we haven't been able to remote work. We haven't been able to, sort of isolate ourselves there. We have to be out there. The teams had to go to calls for service. And there's no doubt there was a period of time where it was palatable, the feel of it when it came to our teams. And how do we try and address that and recognize that it's there? And then how can we help build some of those tools in their toolbox to work through that and come through that? And it's still a work in progress, but I think we've made great leaps when it comes to that. We also have health initiatives where our members can do fitness challenges, or really whatever fills their boat. If it's a knitting challenge or if it's an art challenge, they can be sponsored by the detachment to participate in these. I think it's a great initiative. This is Scott here. I believe he was getting his 20-year service medal with the RCMP.
Man, 25.
25? 20? That was at 20.
That was 22 years.
So Scott was presented with this medal last year, an incredible achievement. I think he's probably due for his 25. So you have a great support within your community, somebody who is very skilled and very valuable resource and has curated an incredible dynamic here.
And he's a nice guy.
And he's
And I live here.
Oh, that's perfect. And a new house.
And
So, yeah. So going forward into 2022, obviously we have the new strategic plan of which we will start to fulfill some of those mandates. It is a 3-year plan. And then obviously partnership focused work will continue to increase our presence in the community. Seasonal events, what does that look like? They're back in action. They're kind of here nor there. Sometimes they're last minute, as we well know within Pemberton, that sometimes they're not quite as planned as they should be because people aren't sure. And how we can sort of roll with that and how we can provide support to Scott and his team and what that all looks like. And then increasing our cohesive work with our CMP with our CMP and search and rescue liaisons with BC Parks, continue our online model with Statland Tribal Police, and really adapt to what COVID's going to look like for the next year. I think we all think the times have changed and we're back to normal, but I think there's evidence that's out there currently that things are on the change again. So we have to be able to adapt as that comes along. And that is our year end.
Thank you so much. You guys want to add anything before I open it for questions, or?
Maybe Scott, do you want to add anything?
just happy to be here. I moved to, I lived here before. I moved to Pemberton before I want to retire. Committed to your community. And trying our best to do what's best for the community.
And you're doing just that.
Yes.
It's a noticeable, your work is tangible,
Well, thank you.
100%.
Not just me, it's the team.
Yes.
They're buying what I'm selling.
Great team. If I might ask one question. The only thing I see being down in Concord that is the public intoxication and vandalism to our washrooms. Knowing that we have more important things to do than that. I understand that, but if anything the village of Pemberton can do to help stop that.
Well, so it is an important thing and we go by there every day. And I know from being here before, it's a decades-long program. I have a lot of irons in the fire trying to figure out what it is. And I've talked to Sheena before about a couple ideas I had, the bus in particular. I'd love to see the bus running more often because people come here and they have 2 hours to wait.
Get in trouble.
So they're waiting with their stuff and then they end up having some. But I'm working on a lot of things. I talk to those individuals every day and trying to convince them that talking to tribal or partners of tribal police, so we're working on it. And I know because it was the same problem when I was here in 2003. Yeah, and I'm not sure what the solution is, but we're trying.
Much appreciated. Thank you very much.
You guys have any questions? Go ahead, Ryan.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's not much a question except just to comment that really appreciate your guys' commitment to this community. Being a parent, walking my kids back and forth to school, I really appreciate seeing the cruisers sitting in the meridians and off side roads. That hits home with a lot of parents here because that zone does kind of, a lot of people do speed through there. So thank you for keeping that up. That's a huge commitment to the community. So thank you for that. And the other comment I wanted to make was that I think it was about a month ago, I saw two members actually walking around Pemberton, which is the first time I've seen that in a long time. I thought that was fantastic. It's been a long time since I've seen two officers walking the beat, and I thought that was great. I kind of brought it up with a couple different citizens in town. I said, "What do you think?" And they're like, "It's great. Like, they love seeing the officers walk around town." So I want to say I like those little changes you've made, and thank you very much.
I got a couple quick questions on some of the numbers. I don't want to take much time on it, but missing persons numbers was fairly significant in your stats. Sasha, is that like all backcountry?
That's Pemberton municipality.
But is that was a lot. I forget the number now. I should have written it down, but it was a pretty reasonable, significant number. So is that again, folks getting lost in the backcountry, or is that other sorts of missing persons?
So like I said, these are Pemberton municipality stats, so they wouldn't incorporate the backcountry unless your village of
Right.
Pemberton municipality goes within to the backcountry.
Yeah.
So there's, you're going from 30 in 2020 to 38 in 2021. Scott might have a bit more details on exactly what they are.
If someone reports, the thing is, if someone reports someone missing, I don't know where so-and-so is. Immediately for us to get, there's like a whole series of things we have to do, put them on CPICS or a database. So even if they're found an hour later, it's still a missing person file. So this happens in Whistler as well. If you misplace your kid for 5 minutes in the village, it happens all the time. Immediately it's carded as it's missing. I'd have to look at the individual files, but there's not a mass of Pemberton residents going missing.
Okay, it just seemed like
Yeah.
Okay, the property crime number as well was of interest to me. Is a lot of that, it's the small property crime under whatever dollar amount. Is that a lot of that vandalism? Is that one?
I don't know, but what I know is when people, and it's not, so the thing about Pemberton is a lot of people say you're getting your break-ins to the cars like there was 2 months ago. Those people, we know where they are, they're not from here. But what they'll do is they'll break into 20 cars. So you have 20 files. So
Right.
you have to look to see, because that one, I'll guarantee you that next year your stats for stolen auto, because there's 2 stolen. That they did, and then there was 24 cars broken into. That one's gonna go through the roof, and it's from them from one weekend. Generally, the people in Pemberton, no one's stealing each other's stuff. And that bike that got stolen off by the school there, the e-bike, got it back.
Oh, is that right?
They got it back themselves. Someone told them where it was, and they got it back. Someone took it for a joyride. Which is different from Whistler, where there's people coming from other locations and specifically stealing bikes.
It's really important when you're looking at statistics in a community where there's not a lot of call volume. When you look at an increase from say 30 to 38 and you see that percentage increase, you really feel like, oh my God, we had 8 more of these things. But in the, when you compare that to the kind of standard deviation that you're going to see in larger municipalities, it's effectively a blip. And in most cases here, it's a blip as well. I think you would really want to kind of be concerned when you're seeing numbers that show like a 200 or 300% increase, which also represent 20, 30, 40, 50 calls in a particular year. That's when you'd be like, something really is happening. I wouldn't be too concerned about 8, 10, even 15 in some cases. And the other thing too to remember, especially with the property crime, is when a lot of people were forced to stay in the area, people are gonna get into trouble.
Right.
And there was just a lot of, I found that there was property crime increases in some other places as well, just because of the pandemic. Whistler was a little bit different. There wasn't as much property crime, and violent crime went up, mental health issues as a result, people staying home, more consumption of alcohol. So you see some of those types of increases. So I just, we're gonna be moving into a pattern here where when we do our monthly meetings, you're gonna get monthly updates of the statistics. I think as we go through this next year, as we start moving into our monthly meetings, you're gonna get a better sense on a month-by-month basis of what those numbers look like, and you'll become more familiar, or whoever's gonna be on council is gonna see those numbers and become more familiar with the pattern and know what to be concerned about, what not to be concerned about. But right now, I don't think there's anything in those stats that are a real concern. It's pretty much steady as we go.
And so along those lines, the numbers weren't alarming at all, but with regards to the presence of harder drugs in the community, have you anecdotally noticed?
No.
Yeah.
Oh, and the one you noticed there too, I saw it, and I saw about the frauds. Those are people from out of country,
Right.
owning your granny, trying to take her money. They're the ones where you open your bank account and somehow there's $1,500 missing. And that is just the way the world's gone. And realistically, we can't, when we try to track them, we can't, no one can figure out who they are. I mean, they're from,
Yeah.
I don't know where they're from, somewhere in the world.
That's a
And
common,
that's a trend
Yeah.
that we can't really do anything.
it's common across a lot of our police agencies. And there's nothing we can do except report it to the major center out of Ottawa and then create the file number, pass it on to the victim, and then they can, talk to their insurance or their bank or whatever. That's
Yeah,
really.
usually the bank gives the money. Money disappears out of your account. You're getting it back. If you send iTunes cards to someone in who knows where.
My last question, probably maybe for all of you, is where are we? You mentioned restorative justice. I know Squamish was doing a bit of a pilot down there for a while. I was involved in a couple meetings. Where are you guys at in your work with restorative justice?
As part of the APP for this year, as a specific initiative, I've actually asked for one of our members to start to engage with that group, the restorative justice folks, to try to look towards establishing a full sea to sky type restorative justice. So I know that in Squamish, they've now evolved into being able to handle more cases. They've now taken a space inside the detachment and are now providing a broader program. So now we actually have a specific initiative in our APPR performance plan that's looking at the work required to expand that to Whistler and to Pemberton and the surrounding area. So that's where we stand. We are in the development research and trying to push for that to happen. We already know that we've got a very positive relationship with the ladies that are in charge of that program. They really want to get out. It comes down to resources. They need the money so that they can actually manage the program, and they can hire the people required to actually deliver what they need to deliver.
Yeah, my understanding, there was some room within that program for the occasional perhaps case coming from Pemberton and Whistler within that. But very strongly supported personally, and hope to see that work continue and be able to get Pemberton more involved in restorative justice.
Yeah, we'd like to see a complete sea to sky approach, a standard consistent approach across all sea to sky with, ideally you'd see offices in either close by or in each of the areas, or at least a worker that can attend in those areas.
And we've done a bunch of things, like some kids got stopped hot shopping. And so their parents were fantastic. They agreed to come in, they wrote an apology note, they repaid the money, and they went and worked with the food bank. So we're doing the old school, I guess we'll call it, because I'm an old guy. But we're doing informal restorative justice. It's not through their program. We can't do it for like a really serious file, but if it's a minor thing, like we're not arresting kids. We are making them, we're not making them, their parents are making them act like regular citizens and accept the responsibility for what they've done. And that one was great. And they apologized, they wrote an apology letter. They paid it back, the stuff they stole, and the 4 hours each at the food bank. It was like win-win for everything. We've had, I don't know, 3 or 4, not that exact scenario, but things just like that, just like we used to do before.
And we're allowed to do that. I mean, the Youth
absolutely.
Criminal Justice Act allows us to do those informal measures, youth warnings. We don't actually have to go through a formal process like restorative justice. I mean, you think of restorative justice, in most cases, it would be, someone who's actually committed a crime that's a bit more serious and would normally go through the courts, but there's a diversion process that actually happens formally. And there's a formal set of steps that actually have to be taken.
And there's also the ability with Crown Council as well, if you forward charges, to do diversion to alternative measures.
Yeah.
Which is always still an option and has been, that's never come off the plate. It's just the restorative justice program became a bit more formalized outside of the organization of the RCMP. So it's now our partner on that would be the North Shore Restorative Justice, and they have to have the funding and the ability to be able to transition that program not only to Squamish, but to the rest of us, and how in the North Zone, so that Whistler and Pemberton, and how that would look. But that doesn't mean that some of the informal processes or alternative measures can't be looked at as being options for us until that program is able to be run by North Shore up here.
Because it's more than diversion. I mean, obviously, it's a victim-based approach. It's a learning approach to the person who committed the offense. It's about, creating that positive outcome. Like with Healing Circles, with the First Nations communities, is about, recognizing the wrong that was done. And then the healing and the forgiveness that kind of goes along with it. Restorative justice is kind of like that as well. So, well, more about that is alternative measures could simply be, instead of going to jail, you have to do something. That's all.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that. I do have to honestly say, over the last last year, under you guys' leadership, I feel like Pemberton has gotten more attention, as being recognized as more on it, as a big part of the sea to sky, and there's no separating us, but there's also been local attention to us. And I feel like it's made a difference. And under your leadership here locally, Scott, honestly, it's a noticeable difference in terms of the tone and the relationship between RCMP and residents. And it feels like back to closer to like small town policing, which I believe is where we need to be. So thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you.
Very much appreciated. Thanks for being here today.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll continue with our monthly meetings, and we'll see you again earlier next year for the year in review, but we'll see you again and give you another update.
That's great. You guys.
Thank you.
And
Thanks for coming.
have a safe drive back to the detachment.
We'll try.
Thanks, guys.
Becca, good to see you.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Take care.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
There is.
Thank you again.
All right. Feel like it's going to be a race to see who passes out first in here today.
I'm pretty close.
You're Rob. Can help on the phone.
Oh, thanks for dropping it.
Yeah, if you could let him in, he's our engineer, consulting engineer. Answer questions, should there be any?
When you're all set up there, Scott, I'll turn it over to you for the bridge.
Yeah. All right. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Purpose of this report is to present a technical memo we have had completed on the Pemberton Creek pedestrian bridge project. So we'll present the report. We can kind of go through it together, and then I'll just talk about our next steps from here on this project. So a little bit of the background on this project. This pedestrian bridge over Pemberton Creek has been discussed as part of the TIADA development obligations for over 10 years. As you'll recall, when the School District 93 CSF acquired this land, they also acquired the obligation to build a pedestrian bridge from the developer. As that OCP and zoning amendment went through the process, it became clear that it was not going to be appropriate to request that applicant at their sole cost build this bridge. And so the prior two obligations were revised at that time to suggest that a collaborative approach would be taken to provide this a pedestrian crossing over Pemberton Creek. So the developer of Tayada has continued to provide voluntary contributions to the village with the goal of developing pedestrian crossings. And so some of those funds were used to produce this preliminary study. And so this study, ISL was retained to provide just a feasibility study essentially, and to start looking at the high level cost analysis of what a project like this would cost. So ISL took kind of the base information we have available, all the latest information, including hydraulic modeling, LiDAR, and some ortho photos. And then they sat down with us and took into account kind of design criteria provided by Village Pemberton staff. So that was things like what the bridge deck width should be roughly, what kind of equipment we wanted to drive over it, so like a bobcat with a snow blower attachment, what kind of users we expected the trail to see. So that was bikes, pedestrians, and horses. And they took all that away and provided the report that was attached to the memo attached to the report, sorry. So I'll just quickly roll through it here on the screen. This is just the drawing set that was the last that was attached to the technical memo. So you can kind of see on the right screen of the screen, these are the 3 locations that ISL identified as being the most likely possible options. So option A is just upstream of the Highway 99 bridge over Pemberton Creek. Option B is, you can zoom in here. Option B is kind of midway between between the highway bridge and the rail bridge. It's kind of a natural narrow point in the channel. And then option C is just downstream of the rail bridge. So we'll just quickly look at the options here. Option A, you can see there, the highway bridge is just below, just downstream. This gives you a good sense of the amount of work that would be required to build this bridge. The abutments, like one of the design criteria was the approaches. We didn't want too steep a slope on the approaches. So you'll see these things, 8% grades is what they've achieved here. But that also obviously requires a fair amount of earthworks to fill it up and retaining to keep that fill out of the channel. So we'll get to that. Here's our 2-meter bridge deck width, and gives you a little bit of a sense of where the creek is at current elevation. Another design criteria was the 200-year flood elevation. We wanted to make sure this bridge would survive a 200-year flood event. So that has also contributed to the amount of fill that's been required here. Option B is fairly similar in terms of span length of the bridge deck. You can see it requires quite a bit more earthworks on the south bank of the creek to sort of build up that to make a nice approach for the bridge. And about the same amount on the north bank. And lastly, there's option C. It's about the same span length. Looks like quite a bit less earthworks on the north bank. Some substantial earthworks on the south bank, and quite a bit of retaining you can see as well on that south bank. So I just also selected the cost estimate summary here for discussion. So this gives you a good sense of what this bridge potentially would cost. This is a very high level cost estimate. So being pretty conservative with these numbers, you can see there's a 25% contingency applied just to account for unknowns. I did want to draw attention to the fact that the actual bridge deck itself, the single span bridge structure, is about $300,000, and so that's less than a third of the project cost here. Just something to be aware of as we look at other options. Really, the majority of the costs here is going to be in the earthworks to create those nice approaches, and the retaining to build abutments at that 200-year flood elevation. There is slight variations in the cost here, and I actually looked through it and worked out myself the amount of earth, just the square meters required of earthworks to do this project. And it, looking at the options, it appears somewhat different, but actually working the numbers out, it's as presented here. It works out to be about the same across the board. You know, this $20,000 variation is about right. But I'll leave that there for now. We can have questions at the end. Village staff did consult Pemberton Valley Diking District about this project. They pointed out their concerns with the channel. They do access the creek channel from that. There's a small ramp down into the channel from that, just around the area of option B. They use that with an excavator to do dredging under the highway bridge, under Pemberton Creek Highway Bridge. So they are a little bit leery of any options that would affect that access. So their preferred access, or their preferred option would be option C. The highway bridge is an interesting topic here. While it's technically accessible for pedestrians, it does not meet safety criteria for all ages and abilities to use this as a safe pedestrian crossing. I've received a couple of letters from residents of Creekside, just expressing frustration with the fact that this is their only option for pedestrian access, and understandably so. Pushing a stroller on that bridge does not seem appealing at all. So this staff have discussed approaching Moti about trying to get them to upgrade this bridge in some way to provide more substantial pedestrian access. I understand there is a long history of doing that. We'll see if we can try. It may be worthwhile. It may be worth exploring at least. We are aware that Moti is aware that this bridge is lower than the 200-year flood elevation, so it does need to be replaced. However, on their list of priority replacements, this one is fairly low down the list. I think last we heard it was below number 2,000. So, however, if we can maybe potentially point out the flood risks combined with pedestrian risks, maybe we can try to bring this bridge higher in the priority list. So that's something that staff would like to explore. We'll also, it's worth reaching out at this point to CN and just having the same conversation to see if there's anything that can be done to create a safe pedestrian access on that bridge. It also is probably a long shot, but it's worth exploring. And then lastly, this technical memo provides a good foundation to make this a shelf-ready project for grant applications. So staff will begin the process of looking for appropriate grant sources for this project. Of course, there's a community climate action plan component of this. Of course, a safe and accessible pedestrian crossing over the Pemberton Creek Bridge will help more residents of our community to select active transportation options and thus leave their cars at homes, which would reduce our GHG emissions. That concludes my report. Are there any questions?
Question. That's correct.
Excuse me, looking at site C option, does that come out at the park in Tayada? Because my concern with that one is that invites people to go across railroad tracks.
That is definitely a concern that ISL raised as well. You're still on the east side of the railway tracks, and so the natural inclination of users will probably be to cross the railway tracks at the most convenient location. So that is a downside with that location.
Okay, and on Tayada side, is that the little park that's there where it comes up?
I believe so. If it's not right there, it is within a block or within one lot.
Okay. And the other question I've got for all these bridges, they don't connect anything on to the west side. So is the trail cost included? Because I've been on the other side. And it's not that easy to get to places, you know, so. You know, we put in $1 million bridge. And people got no place to access or go from. I mean, everybody can find a way there, I'm sure. But what are we planning for trails in that section?
Yeah, so this study only considered what's shown on these drawings, so you can kind of see the extent of works was just the grading required to get it down to the grade, to the surrounding grade. So
Yeah, because I guess the reason I'm asking that is if we don't have that discussion, who are we actually putting the bridges in for?
yeah, that's a valid point.
Well, the council will recall that there is a trail component for the school.
But that's on the other side.
So, or you're talking along the creekside side?
On Creekside, on
It's
the
the
west
dike.
side.
Yeah, because there is the Dike Trail on the west side. But it would be definitely discussing with Creekside as to where the property line lays. A lot of Creekside has expanded down into the river, taken in, but there are setbacks. So it would be looking at what that looks like.
You can see the property line on this view here.
Which, oh yes, it is noted there on this view there on the left of the page, property line typical gives you a sense of where the actual property line will fall.
And the only other thing I've got, if I can follow up, option A to me is not my favorite, because at some point in time, the bridge is gonna have to be replaced, and if we put any money into our own bridge, then it may be out of character with a new bridge going in, so I don't know, I guess option B to me seems like a good option. Thank you.
Anyone else? Noted by Councillor Zant.
Yeah, after hearing the report for, option A, I agree with Councillor Craddock that I think that's probably not one of our best options. I mean, hopefully we can get that bridge bumped up the list a little bit further, and maybe in that we can mention it to MLA Sturdy. And like I said, I think at this point, I think option B is probably our best bet.
You. Councillor Nolan, do you have anything?
Yes, I would also support option B.
That's sort of where I was going myself, was option B. And question for you, I recognize the groundwork that has to be done and all that. I'm still a little bit surprised by how much it was. I mean, we built the Friendship Trail Bridge for 1.5 million or something like that, and that's in the Lillooet River. And I know it was a few years ago and costs have gone up significantly, but I'm still a little bit surprised. So, and I know it's your job to make this, 200-year flood level and all those sorts of consideration. My question is, putting you on the spot, are we over engineering or overbuilding this bridge? Is there the opportunity? I mean, and I'm happy to, actually, I'll just ask that question first.
Sure, I'll answer this, and then I'd like to ask Robin to chime in as well.
Sure.
I would just answer that by saying that this is a high level cost estimate. It's aiming at being conservative, so it probably is. Without saying it, I'd want to say it's probably high, but it would be the highest on the high range of what a project like this would cost. But I'll look to ISL to answer that in more technical details.
Yeah, sure. Well, firstly, I would like to echo that every time I do one of these exercises, I get surprised about how much things cost. What we have been seeing, though, is tender estimates increasing significantly due to both labor and, more importantly, materials. What we did have for this is quite a comparative bridge from a manufacturer. So the bridge itself, we had pretty good numbers on. So the baseline bridge, which is a pre-engineered steel truss option with weathering steel as sort of the based option, from a project that is finished construction about 2 weeks ago. So those numbers are reasonable. We put an escalation on it because the steel was procured about a year ago. So there's been a steel escalation of about 30%. That might come down depending on the timing. And there might be some local effects of just availability of aggregate and machinery and those types of things that might bring it down. I wouldn't, my professional judgment is that I wouldn't reduce the budget at this point, given the level of detail that our design is evolved to. But we think it is safe. We think it is on the safe side.
And I appreciate all that, Robin. Thank you. And I guess I'm looking, what this bridge is going to be used for, which I think it's very important. We're committed to connecting town in every way we can and active transportation. And I do believe that there are going to be some grant opportunities available for this. Active transportation is very much buzz word right now, so I think we'll have a good chance at it. I'm just kind of looking at it going, okay, for what it's gonna get used for, and I want to build for the future, I don't want to build for right now. But I just think to myself, it's to carry pedestrians, you know, with their groceries and stuff like that into town so that they don't have to take their cars. That was I get the tendering and I get the price, you know, you're saying, let's be conservative and it's high level. I'm just more like, are we building too big a bridge here, I guess is the question. Do we
So there's a
need,
couple things going on that should probably be highlighted in this design as it's presented. If you can scroll down just a little bit there, Scott. We had some discussion about the width, and a 2.5 meter is about the minimum width you need to get a snow clearing machine through. And it's the minimum width for multimodal two-way traffic. We're also working on a similar bridge with, I would say, a similar amount of residents potentially using it in Canmore. So, you know, another resort municipality of maybe a similar demographic, and they've chosen to go to 4.5 to 6 meters wide for their future development. So, you know, we're having these meetings at the same time as those meetings, and so relatively, I would say we've picked sort of a minimum. This isn't a backcountry trail where we might pick something like 1.2 meters because you're not going to have strollers. A biker can stop and wait for a pedestrian to cross, those types of things. I think the 2.5 meters is sort of a minimum. There's also a guideline from NBC for pedestrian bridges and the widths, and that's what's presented here.
I guess, sorry.
My farmer engineering says, yeah, let's throw a rail car across here and some lock blocks and get her done. But that's not the type of bridge that we're dealing with. The spans are pretty significant. And the spans are, we might be able to shrink the spans a little bit with a more detailed hydrological study. So far, what we've done is tried to not reduce the hydraulic opening significantly. And we're basing our elevation off the future dike elevation, which is a 1 in 200 year. So there may be opportunity to revisit that with a detailed hydrology analysis to reduce the span, and reducing the span of a bridge is more than just the square footage of reduced. If you can reduce the span, the stress is reduced, all of the works reduce, you know, more than linearly, except for the baseline things like the piles, the abutments, those would only reduce a little bit. So that would certainly be explored, is reducing the spans a little bit.
Okay, thanks for that answer. And I guess also if we're looking at active transportation grant opportunities, there's going to be a minimum width and standard requirements to be able to call it active transportation and not just recreational pedestrian, right? So, okay.
That's right.
Any other questions? There's no more questions. Just looking for receipt here, or do we not need direction anyway?
No, this was being brought forward just purely for information. So the council, so I think it did come up a couple meetings ago where things were at with that, and it's particularly around the changes on the covenant requirements. And so we felt it would be appropriate to bring just an update to council to say, this is the work that's being done. So this is just for receipt at this point. There's more work to be done.
So what about with the preferred crossing? Is that we wait till we get more detailed information, or?
I think that's probably the appropriate response at this point, this is a good starting point, but then if more funding is applied, we would probably want to revisit the exact alignment, and there may be some tweaking to look at doing then, once, as Robin was mentioning, once the hydrological or hydraulic modeling is complete.
And so
reveal some more information.
So in terms of getting a project, a shelf-ready project, we don't need direction for that. That's going to happen as it is.
Well, if council wanted to sort of indicate their preferred preference being option B, because what we heard then, that could be helpful.
But what about the preparation of it to have it as a shelf-ready project? Do we need to direct staff to have?
That might,
Also, I think as it stands, we have this ready. We can use it as the basis for grant applications, so.
Awesome. Then I'll look for a motion to receive, please. Councilor Scott, seconded by Councilor Zant. Any opposed? Motion carries. And I know it says in the report that we're going to continue to work with the CSF. But that's, I mean, there is an obligation that we lighten on their behalf. So I don't know in terms of funding and future contribution to this as they go through construction. I don't know what that, I'm wondering what that conversation sounds like.
Not sure at this point. They've only just received the funding to purchase the land. So I don't believe we've had any applications or any conversation with CSF in terms of when they plan to start moving forward.
I guess my point is we sort of relieve them to a certain degree of some of the commitment is because of the development, as we all know, and the funding that was available to them. And I don't want to relieve them completely of their commitment or leave it as just a vague statement that staff's going to work with them. I'm hopeful that there's some concrete discussions in terms of how they can contribute to the project, be it through groundworks as they do construction, or I don't know what, right? But I want to make sure that that doesn't get lost. So. Okay. I called the question, right?
Yes.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Motion to adjourn, leave the whole. Councilor Scott, second by Councilor Zant, any opposed? That was adjourned.
You want to go back into in camera?
Yeah, I'd like to. Yeah, we've only got 2 items, I think, left on camera. Anybody need 5 here or we?
Need to be able to close.
Yeah. Right outside, and there's fruit there if you want. Okay. All right, I'm going to call back to order the regular council meeting 1565. And again, in honor of the Lewa Tool, the Village of Pemberton acknowledges that we are meeting within the unceded territory of the Lewa Nation. Those members of the public in attendance, please note that this meeting is a live webinar and is being recorded. A recording of the meeting will be available on the village's website following the meeting. Any amendments to the agenda? None. Motion to approve. Councilor Caddick, second by Councilor Noble. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Your worship, would you want to mention that Councilor Antonelli is not in attendance today?
Okay, yeah, so on virtually we have Councilor Zant, Councilor Noble, Councilor Caddick, myself are live, and Councilor Antonelli is absent today. We have two rides with a report from in camera. The first is that Remy Shafito be awarded the 2022 Village Bursary Award in the amount of $3,000 to be allocated from the Community Enhancement Fund. And also from June 21st, that Urban Systems be awarded the contract to facilitate the 2022 to 2024 official community plan review. And that staff be directed to prepare a contract for services based on the response to RFP number 2022-01 received on June 3rd from Urban Systems for execution by the CAO. Get a mover?
No,
We don't need that. Here. Approval of minutes from regular council meeting 1564 from June 21st, moved by Councilor Noble, seconded by Councilor Zant. Any opposed? Motion carries. Any business arising? Seeing none. Business arising from committee of the whole from Tuesday, June 21st. The first item is with regards to a live share co-living proposal on Crab Apple Court. The recommendation from committee of the whole is that staff be directed to assist in negotiating a shared parking covenant amendment with the adjacent commercial tenures, prepare a final parking variance strategy, and establish a means to secure the proposed transportation innovations for the proposed development at 7340 Crab Apple Court, which includes a proposed parking variance for future consideration by council. Second recommendation from committee of the whole is that an annual review of the bullying, harassment, and discrimination policy takes place at a committee of the whole meeting to be held in the spring.
We need movers.
Yeah, can I get a move on both of those? Seconded by Councilor Noble. Any discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. So that'll jump us ahead to number 12. We're on staff reports. Office of the CAO. And CAO Tracy.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Richmond. I just want to acknowledge the work of staff in the preparation of these reports that we're about to review. And that's all I have to report.
Awesome, thank you. I guess I got a motion to receive that. Councillor Craddock, second by Councillor Zant. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up is Office of the CEO 2022 second quarter strategic priorities update. Ms. Fraser.
Thank you. This is the Office of the CAO, second quarter strategic priorities. I am presenting it as CAO Tracy joined us the last 2 weeks of the second quarter to go. So we decided that it would be appropriate for me to present, given I was acting during this time. This report provides an overview of the activities that took place by the Office of the CAO. Reporting by our various members of the team in terms of emergency management. Sarah Taves did an awful lot of work and been working on the emergency and wildfire preparedness event that was held at the barn. There was a project kickoff of the Community Wildfire Resiliency Plan, which is underway right now and will be doing its work through the fall and into early winter. And facilitated preparedness sessions with internal departments and community stakeholders to just be prepared for the freshet and wildfire and extreme heat and air quality and all of the various emergency response items that we have on the go at various times during the year. Our communications and grant coordinator was really busy with the annual report, preparing that and working with myself and department heads on preparing that document. There were 2 grant funding applications submitted during that time. We also, she prepared the BC Hydrobox Public Art Competition, which is underway, and encourage people to submit their presentations for July 31st is the deadline. Some of the other highlights, human resources was really busy with onboarding and transfers of some of our staff. And then obviously, sadly, we saw the fire chief and building official and our operations administrative assistant leave this during that quarter. But we are in the process of recruiting and moving forward with that. So ongoing recruitment has been recruitment really, and those types of activities have been huge for our HR coordinator, and she's doing an amazing job. Our executive assistant, Lindsay Annett, supported myself, supported with the preparation and onboarding of Ms. Tracy, and coordinated the working group for the municipal hall and fire hall development, the facilities development. Represented the village at the Regional Economic Development Collaborative, the Sea to Sky Destination Management Committee and Tourism Pemberton. Attended the New Quintal organizing committees, and unfortunately, the New Quintal gathering was yet again postponed. So she's now currently working with the group to see that that gets moved forward for September, hopefully. What's really exciting is I worked really hard to pull together cultural safety and humility training for all staff. This has been a challenge to coordinate just because there's so many options out there and trying to figure out and pull everybody together. But I'm happy to report that we will be heading into that training next week. For majority of the staff, and the fire department will have its own specialized training in the fall that we've managed to work out. Lindsay Zanich has managed to work out a deal where they will do it online, but as a group. And so we're really excited about that. And it's all covered by a grant, which had been extended. So we're really super excited about being able to move that initiative forward.
That's next week.
Staff, yeah, our staff training is the 19th and 20th. We're going in shifts. That'll be held at Ulish. It's an all-day event. And then the fire department training is a bit of a different concept. It'll be online. Yeah. And but with I can't remember the gentleman's name right now, but he does an online program, and anyone who doesn't attend this summer is able to also attend on the weekend in the fall if they wish. So, yeah, very excited and came under budget. And then for our strategic priorities, the listing of priorities, obviously council's priorities is the first page of the attachment. The breakdown, although some of these priorities are completed in the sense that the work to get them to the next step has been done. They are an ongoing element. The Community Climate Action Plan obviously is one of them. The plan has been completed, but the work will be ongoing as we proceed in the future. And then we're happy to pleased to say that work is moving forward on the daycare expansion project. We've got a project manager and work is starting to move forward on that one, which had been, daycare had kind of been moving up and down on the list of council's priorities. Some of the other priorities are still on hold, but we will be moving them forward as we can over the next few months. And I don't know that it's really necessary for me to go through the individual department priorities unless council has any questions. I'm happy to answer.
Awesome, thank you. Any questions? The asset management, summer 2022 completion, is that still?
Yes,
In progress, so.
yeah,
That's awesome.
that's moving, it's moving forward.
Awesome, great. Okay, if there's no questions, the motion to receive, please. Councilor Craddock, second by Councilor Zant. For the discussion, any opposed, motion carries. Ms. Fraser. So we are on to bullying, harassment, and discrimination policy update. Ms. White out Mahalo,
Yeah, she was.
Emily Dodd. Come on in, the air is really good in here. Let's see. Okay, thank you, Ms. White, for being here. We're on 12A3, the bullying and harassment discrimination policy update, and you're good to go.
Thank you very much for having me here this evening. This is just a follow-up presentation following Committee of the Whole on 21st of June. At that presentation, I brought forward a couple of updates to the Village of Pemberton bullying, harassment, discrimination policy. As part of that report, it was recommended that I brought forward a finalised policy for council for final sign-off. There was one addition that I made to the policy, and that can be found on pages 31 to 30 or 30 to 31 of the agenda. And that change to the policy really was more to kind of more clearly define the difference between the responsibility of council and the responsibility of Village of Pemberton management in terms of the awareness and training of this particular policy. I think really today, should council be supportive of that change, I'd like to seek recommendation that the policy receives its final approval with a view that I then bring it back on an annual basis moving forward. I think that's all I have. Any questions at all?
Very much. Any questions? Comments? Okay, thank you for bringing that forward. Would somebody like to move approve the bullying, harassment, and discrimination policy and the annual review of this policy for 2022 be concluded? Moved by Councilor Craddock, second by Councilor Noble. Any opposed? Carries. Thank you. Go.
Thank you.
Meeting. Corporate and Legislative Services, Second Quarter Administrative Update, Ms. Kennedy.
Mayor and Council. Purpose of this report is to present an update on the Corporate and Legislative Services Administration activities in the second quarter of 2022. And this report complements the outstanding resolutions update also on today's agenda. In the second quarter, in collaboration with the Government Services, the Pembina Fire Rescue and Finance, Corporate and Legislative Services issued 24 business licenses and added to the 456 licenses issued in the first quarter. This number exceeds the total number of business licenses issued in any of the previous 3 years. No film permits were issued in the second quarter, but
Bills received 2 inquiries regarding possible film shoots in the summer. No outdoor water use or backyard hand permits were issued. As expected, due to ongoing staff shortage by law enforcement, ticketing remains significantly below normal levels, with only 2 tickets issued in the second quarter. Customer service requests, which include all inquiries, complaints, and suggestions received from the public. In this quarter, so far in 2022, 156 CSRs have been received, on track to exceed the previous 3 years. However, the number of CSRs related to bylaw offenses has dropped, and the number related to operations issues has increased. Not surprising because of the new developments in residential and recreational activities that have added to public works workload. And again, the bylaw is naturally dropped because of less bylaw enforcement. The recommendations report that council received the corporate and legislative services 2022 second quarter administration update. This concludes my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Questions? No questions. Comments? Someone like to move receipt? Councillor Noble, second by Councillor Zant. Any opposed? Motion carries.
This next report is the update on resolutions from previous regular council meetings that have yet to be actioned. Staff initiates actions when directed to do so by council through resolutions adopted at regular council meetings. On occasion, resolutions cannot be actioned immediately due to lack of resources or conflicts with other actions or other factors outside staff control. This quarterly review keeps council informed of the status of any resolutions not yet actioned. The list of outstanding resolutions is attached as Appendix A on page 41 of your agenda package. One action, boundary extension, has been held over since the previous council. The resolution to appoint council and staff to oversee implementation of the Partners for Climate Protection milestones is subject to approval in 2023 of a staff position to oversee the Community Climate Action Plan implementation. The airport lease rate review will be brought forward for consideration during the 2023 budget deliberations. Review of electronic meetings will be brought to council in August or September of this year. And the remaining outstanding resolutions will be actioned as staff time and resources permit. The recommendation of this report is that council receives the corporate and legislative services 2022 second quarter regular council meeting outstanding resolutions update. And this concludes my report. If you have any questions.
Questions on the outstanding resolutions? Okay, motion received, please. Councillor Craddock, second by Councillor Zant. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Great.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Purposes of this report is to present, to update council on the activities of the Development Services Department in the second quarter of 2022. So we had on the building side, we had 84 building permit applications received, 65 building permits issued, bringing in a total of just over $179,000 on $22 million in construction value. $41,000 of DCCs were collected. Compared to the same period last year, we're showing a slight decrease in volumes and values, and the DCCs are substantially lower. This again is just down to the size and complexity of the projects that were applied for or issued in that time period. So last year we had several multifamily projects come through the door and get issued at this time. On the planning side, we have the development permit number 90 was authorized for issuance. That's for the 10 Keel building on Prospect Street. The OCP and zoning amendments for the new Francophone school were adopted last quarter. The Sunstone Phase 1C subdivision was completed and the works secured, including Pemberton Farm Road East, the resurfacing work there. And Sunstone Phase 3, the TAL was issued. On to the long range planning side, we have selected and hired our OCP update consultant. That will be Urban Systems, and we also completed a kickoff meeting with them. So good to get that moving. The OCP Advisory Commission also had their first meeting, which was great. They have a good group of volunteers involved. So looking forward to that. And they were assigned their homework for the summer, which is to audit the OCP, the current OCP, and come back with issues that they would like to see addressed. The DCC bylaw update is in progress. The first phase is done, the projects are selected, and now we're on to the next phase, which is working through the municipal assist factor. And other aspects of that, the weighting as well, other aspects of that bylaw. Subdivision development and control bylaw update is also underway, so we've hired ISL to help us with the bulk of that work. And again, existing bylaw audit is in process right now. The first staff workshop will be in the beginning of August. On the staffing side, we are still actively recruiting for a building official. We've sort of broadened the approach, and so we're advertising a little bit more widely to the construction community in town. Sort of, if you don't have the qualification necessarily, but you're interested in the career change, please let us know. We'd be interested in talking to you. So if you know anyone who has some construction experience, would like to change a career, please send them my way. Our contract building official program is working out very well in the meantime. So we have 3 contractors filling in a few hours a week each, and that seems to be providing good coverage in the meantime. I provided a quick update on the community climate action plan, and I'll continue to add that into the quarterly reports going forward. So just summarizing what we've implemented, what's prioritized, and what will be sort of left for future. And that we did receive word in the last quarter that there is a new grant opportunity through the provincial government, which we will apply for, the local government climate action program. So more to come on that. That concludes my report. The recommendation is for council to receive for information. Any questions?
Great. Questions? The contract building inspector, you said it, but you've got adequate coverage. Builders are getting the attention they need.
Exactly. I judge by the fact there's not an angry lineup of builders going out the front door every day. So I think that everything I've heard is that the program's working well.
That's good news.
Yeah, and we have one contractor coming in person for Monday and Tuesday each week, mostly every week.
Yeah,
and that's been helpful as well for some people who prefer the in-person style. So
yeah, okay. All right, thank you. Motion to receive, please. Mr. Caddick, second by Councilor Noble. Any opposed? Okay.
thank you.
This is great. Have a good night. FEMA operations second quarter.
Evening, Mayor and Council. Thanks for having me. I'm starting with the second quarter report. I'm just going to share my screen because I do have some photos in the report. Just bear with me. Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you make it a little bit bigger?
Bigger? Sure. How's that?
That's perfect. Thanks very much.
Okay. So as always, quarterly reports are to provide council with an update on what we're doing in operations. So I like to use a list. It's the most concise way to go through it. Please feel free to stop me or ask me about more clarification on some of these items. With spring, obviously, we're very busy doing spring cleanup type of activities, getting the parks tidied up, flower orders, etc., as well as starting off some projects. That's our busiest construction season in the summer, obviously. So just getting everything ready to go. So here's a list of the sort of ongoing regular activities and minor projects, if you will. The regular operation, inspection and maintenance of sanitary lift stations, wastewater treatment plant, water conditioning plant, well house, pumping stations. We did our force main flushing in the spring, so that's when we flushed out all the sanitary force main lines. Water main flushing as well, so that's flushing the drinking water from the hydrants to remove any settling sediment in the pipes, improve water quality. We did our quarterly water meter reads, development, engineering design reviews. We had a few new phases of Sunstone come on to the water system, so that's it's quite involved in coordinating that with the developer and their engineers and contractors, as well as with the absence of our building inspector. Public Works has taken back on the sanitary and water inspections for for residential connections. I kind of like our group doing that anyways. So we're the ones that usually have to fix it later on if there's problems. But again, that's it's just another time-consuming thing. We had emergency sewer line repair. It was a sewer service next to the general store there. I'm not sure if people saw when that was happening, but we had to get a back truck in to help us with that. We did complete some shop improvements. Our gravel shed, which collapsed in the winter due to the snow load. We've rebuilt and improved it greatly. As well as ongoing SCADA controlled improvements. We sort of started our investigations into the Fernwood water main replacement. We've also been doing our GIS system improvements and getting data together for our infrastructure modeling, which we're working with our consultants on, as well as an asset management inventory review. We've been getting with our consultant who's doing the asset management plan, just finding development years and dates and costs and things like that to help with that review. In parks, the ongoing garbage collection, public toilets, cleanups, grass mowing, trimming. We completed our annual flower order, which is always a big undertaking, but the garden beds are looking really nice. We had to do some overseeding and top dressing and fertilization at the soccer field. And yeah, I think that's all I had for the ongoing general maintenance type items. And I understood that council had requested a bit of an update on some of our other projects. I don't always include this in this report, but you know, if there's nothing new to report, but I'm conscious that sometimes I'm aware of changes that council might not be. So I'll try and breeze through this quickly. Feel free to ask me at the end if you want to expand on anything, but soccer field number 2. So the field is built and nearly ready to be played on. The lighting is the current hang up. We have the lights in place and all the electrical work was done. We're just waiting on Hydro to do the final connection. I'm told that that's in their work order package. So it should be happening in the next couple of weeks, I'm told, but it's not the first time I was told that. So we'll just hold our breath on that one. Amenity building, I think that was reported on previously. We're just preparing the request for proposal using a consultant. One of the things on that, we have to do a fair bit of work on water and sewer connections there because there is no water and sewer nearby. So we've got our consultants working on that as well.
Yeah, asked about that. Is that covered in the cost of the building?
There is room in the grant for water and sewer connections. I suspect, well, definitely not enough for what the cost will be. However, we built in quite a bit of contingency and I've got some other areas of funds available for that, but we haven't determined the final cost of it yet. So I can't answer that. But presumably that'll be covered in the grant.
If I might, are you planning any of that for this fall? Water and sewer or anything into the site?
I would, yes. That's our goal, is to have at least the servicing done. I'm not really taking the lead on the RFP for the building, or I might be, but I haven't yet. I think we have consultants issuing that RFP, but I'm just making sure that they have water and sewer to connect to when the building's done.
Thank you.
We're also working on planning to include some electric vehicle chargers at that location as well.
Would they be in front of the soccer fields or closer to the amenity?
It would be at the amenity building. It would run off the power service for the building. Yeah.
Thank you.
Permanent Farm Road East upgrade. There's been extensive planning work around. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed the Mountain Bike Skills Park. I think everyone's aware that we're having our grand opening this Saturday.
16th, not 16th.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. My bad. Now you see 16. Your council package is wrong. Pardon me. This Saturday, I think it's 10 till 12 is the opening event. So it should be fun. So there are a few outstanding items, but we're hoping to get it all done by then. But if anything's missing, it will be very minor. Permanent Farm Road East upgrade. We're working with the developer and planning the resurfacing of that road in conjunction with potentially doing the trail. So just working on some details on that before we have a construction schedule planned. But possibly that road upgrade will happen this year. It's possible. Water treatment investigation. So this one I just included on here because it was one of our priorities, although we're not really working on much right now for this. We've applied for the grant. This is for water treatment to remove manganese from our drinking water supply, which would involve a $8 million facility. So we're waiting on grant funding application before we're doing much else. But in the meantime, we're kind of focusing on water conservation and leak detection, because any project will require, we still want to conserve our water use. Lot 13, multimodal transportation hub. So we were successful in our grant application there. We've completed the survey. Engineering design is ongoing right now, as well as environmental and geotechnical investigations. So that's moving along.
If I might,
Please.
again, timeframe.
Well, I have not received the timeline from the engineers on the design, which I was told would be this week. We would get that. We still needed geotechnical and environmental anyways. In terms of construction, I sort of doubt it would be done in this construction season, but I haven't seen the proposed schedule yet. So
Does it have to be preloaded at all?
it shouldn't, because we would probably import the material. So
Thank you.
there is some environmental concerns on that site. So we're kind of waiting till we get the environmental report done before making a plan on what we would have to do. The second part of that lot would be the community garden. We're sort of holding off until we, as I mentioned, have a better idea of the environmental and geotechnical implications before we start looking for grants on the garden portion. But we do have Stewardship Pemberton is eager to get the garden there. So they're kind of looking out for grants and keeping us posted on some of their thoughts on that. EV chargers. So we were also approved for a grant for some fast chargers downtown. This would be located beside the gazebo. It'd be the level 3 fast chargers. So the kind that you can charge up in 5 minutes. And we just signed the agreement, the funding agreement. So we can now order the units that would be put in. The civil work would be done next year, but we're going to order the units now because apparently the price goes up in August. Then I mentioned EV chargers at Dundalk Park, that we'd roll that in with the amenity building. Pembroke Farm Road East washout. So I like to point out that my daughter was born a week after this happened, and she's now 2.5 years old. So it's been a long time. We've been waiting on BC Hydro civil contractors because essentially what happened was the hydro ducts were damaged. We fixed our part of the road, but they'll have to tear it up to fix the ducts. So we've been working with them on this, and they have told us that August that will occur, but it will require a shutdown of the ridge, the whole ridge neighborhood. So I think that means that they'll need to provide notice and all of that.
Is that shut down because of the road or because of power?
The power shutdown. Yeah, we would run single lane alternating, similar to what it was when the washout was before we repaired the road. Which we determined to be okay. There's not that much traffic there. So one lane seemed to work for, I think for a whole summer, we had one lane there and didn't cause any major issues. So 1 Mile Lake Fish Habitat Restoration. So this project, if council remembers, we did in 2020 with DFO. We cleared out the entire inlet channel and established a little bit of a new channel as well to provide more fresh water into the lake. When doing that, we discovered that the culvert that is at the top of this channel, basically between Pemberton Creek and this channel, was has failed basically, and we're not getting the flows that we want still. So we're working with DFO and we're going to replace that culvert in the fish window this August. So we're ready to go there. We have the culvert and we're just waiting for that appropriate window. So we're hoping that we'll see better flows into the lake. We've already seen better flows with the channel work, but the other part is that we're seeing sedimentation in the channel when we get the high flow periods. The idea is we can close off the gate valve on the culvert so that we're not getting all that sediment coming into the channel and clogging it up. But we can't do that now because the culvert is like Swiss cheese. Wastewater treatment plant outfall mitigation measures. I think I presented to council on this recently. We've just been working on some solutions to the issue of sedimentation in the Lillooet River, which is causing the outfall to get blocked. So we are just reaching out to some consultants about some operational changes that we can make to help with perhaps flushing the lines and so forth. We also have a new river survey done that we're working with the hydrologists to determine if there's something we can do to help avoid the accumulation of sediment as well. I'm sorry, this is a very long list, as I said, but I'll try and keep going fast here. Wastewater treatment plant PLC CPU replacement. You don't really need to know too much about this, but it's just a sort of major component of the process that we'll need to replace. Hoping to do that when the parts arrive. Walnut lift station upgrade, we haven't started this, but we did identify that it's in need of an upgrade. There is a development that's in the queue that would be contributing to this catchment area. And so the developer, I believe, will be required to contribute to the upgrade work. So I think that they will probably ask us when this is going to happen sooner rather than later. So this is on the radar of our consultants, but we haven't started yet. We have the proposal in hand. Wastewater treatment plant receiving environment. There's one that's complete. But it's not really, because it's something that we have to do annually. So my hope here is that we can convince the Ministry of Environment to reduce the requirement, because essentially the flows that the river has relative to the levels that we output into it, it's almost impossible that we would see any issues in the receiving environment. The idea of this is in case any effluent starts to accumulate in like a pocket of the river that would create a concentrated area of contaminants that caused environmental harm, but the flows of the river are so fast that this would not really happen. It would happen in a smaller creek potentially. But after 2 years of testing, we've got pretty good evidence that that's not going to be an issue. That might be a long process to get an Ministry of Environment to change. Signal Hill sidewalk. We've been working on the design for this. This is the portion between Tayada Boulevard and the school. We just keep running into complications. It's always when it's a simple job that it's not such a simple job. But we're hoping to have this built before the school year starts in September. I can't guarantee that though. I also want to make sure that it's done right. So don't hold me to that. Because if it's not looking good, I'm not going to try and push it before September. Roundabout sidewalk widening complete. That was done. We identified the need to widen that sidewalk, and we did. So that's great. 1 Mile Lake Trail widening. This one, we're waiting on our environmental approvals, which we submitted in January. They say it can take 12 to 18 months. So doubtful that this will happen in the fish window of 2022, which is this August, but you never know. Hopefully by next fish window. Wastewater treatment plant confined space procedures. I actually just received the first draft of the procedures. So once I review that, we can plan that. That's been on the books for a few years now. So I'm really excited to get that one done. And then following that is the wastewater treatment plant basin fitting. So once the procedure is approved by WorkSafe, we can actually get in the basins and hopefully improve the treatment that we're currently starting to see. The aeration is not as effective because basically you get a lot of settling in the basins. Fernwood water main and PRV replacement. Oh, I think I mentioned that before, but we unfortunately were unsuccessful in our initial investigations trying to locate that water main. So we're kind of back to the drawing board. Speed readers installations. I believe we're just waiting on the funding approval from ICBC, which will cover 50% of the costs, and then we can order them and put them in. It's relatively easy to do. So we've got the idea to rotate these around the village. We've already have a couple of places located as ideas. The roundabout electronic sign. this one's kind of on hold. The ministry does not support this initiative due to their concern of distracted driving. They believe that an electronic sign would be more distracting, even if it was static. So don't really have much else to report on that one. And then we just started the subdivision development control bylaw update. So that will take a lot of the operations team time to review and provide feedback on that. And that will be followed by the development cost charges bylaw update, which I doubt would happen this year, but I believe our development services manager is ambitious and hopes to have them both done this year. And I support it. It would be great to get them both done. So I included some photos. This was taken back in the second quarter. Obviously now it's almost finished, but this is the pump track being graded. It's quite impressive if you haven't already seen it. Now it's paved and hopefully the grass is starting to grow. This was the long stick excavator that we rented, 65-foot reach, to help us with the irrigation / stormwater management pond at that site. So just it was a nice, impressive photo. You've probably seen the garden beds downtown. They look great. And shout out to the parks crew for all their hard work. This was just the water main connection at Sunstone Phase 2, which again, our operations team are heavily involved in. Water operators going inspecting, as well as the engineering GIS technician and myself and whoever else I can get to go if I'm too busy. So yeah. Lastly, this was that repair. I thought I would just include this because it was kind of interesting to me. You can't see that well on here, but basically this pipe must have been hit years ago, and over time the root mass grew into the sewage pipe and started just eventually just completely blocked it. There's only one house that's serviced by this, but over time it no longer flowed and it caused sewage to flow. So we cleaned that all up and fixed the pipe. So lastly, just there's no impact on budget. It's just a report on the progress for the quarter, and all of these items, there's nothing really to report on. So I just ask that you receive this for information.
Mr. Chima, any questions? I had a few questions, but you answered all except one, and that is simply around the skills park, recognizing it's a new asset / activity. Do we have signage going up in terms of respect your neighbor and that sort of thing?
Absolutely.
Make noise.
So we have an entry sign that lays out all the sort of the rules and the code of conduct type of thing. It also covers the liability issues of, obviously people can get hurt doing this. And then each area also has signs explaining how to progress the skill levels and so forth. But each sign includes sort of the, sorry, I forget the term that I think I used, but the rules basically of, respect your neighbor. And the hours of operation, which will be just daylight hours, and within the noise control bylaw. And I believe that that's all covered in the signage that we have. In fact, I think it's sitting on my desk there. You might have seen it on the way in. We haven't put it up yet, but yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
If I may follow up on your question, is this also for skateboard?
The signage states that it is not, but I do have a feeling that skateboarders would like to and will use it. So
There's been some out there. So
yes,
I just wanted to ask.
I'm wondering as it gets used and dirtier, the skateboarders, and you know what I mean? Like when bikes go back and forth from track to track, I'm wondering they drag dirt around. It's not conducive for skateboarders.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm also not sure if once it's open, that once there's a lot of bikes there, that it will be very attractive for skateboarders to use. Because you're sharing the space with the bikes, but we do have a wonderful skate park in town. So I don't see any cause of like maintenance issues of the skateboards using the park, other than safety potentially But the idea is, you yield to the slower person anyways, so I don't really see a huge issue with skateboarders using it, other than potentially noise complaints. I don't think that the noise would be much different skateboards compared to bikes, but
Actually,
technically our rules state no skateboards. I doubt that we will enforce that. Like, we don't even have a lot of bylaw enforcement around town. I don't think that we would enforce skateboards there, but I think it might be self-policed by the bike.
and as part of the signage as well.
It is in the signage, so officially that they are not allowed.
Thank you.
Every year we take on more and more landscaping, it seems, and it looks great around town. Like, please pass that on to the staff, despite the fact that they take on more and more, like everywhere, which I know it's a lot to keep up with. And,
Yeah, thank you. That's much appreciated. And just on that note, we are struggling a little bit to keep up with it all. This year is definitely hitting hard, with all the sunstone landscaping, and then seeing all that hydro seed getting put in on the back slopes of the jumps. It's a bit scary. So I believe we've already put forward in our staffing planning to have another parks worker next year, and we'll probably already use one this year, but yeah, I'll use that as my pitch, that please do consider that when we're looking at budget time next year.
So thank you. And again, pass that on to the crew.
I will. Thank you.
Motion to receive, please. Councilor Kraddick, seconded by Councilor Zant. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chima. Have a great night.
I think I got
Oh, you're still with us, sorry. Drinking water.
Yes, so I will share my screen again, I suppose. It's not as visually appealing as sanitary sewer pipes, but I will just put the numbers up there. So yes, thank you again for having me, council. So this is an annual report that we are obligated to do by the provincial safe drinking water action plan. Basically, it's just a report that we publish to our users or our consumers of the drinking water, and as well as that we submit to Vancouver Coastal Health, who is the regulator of health and safety around water quality and compliance standards. So essentially, yeah, it's just a summary of our operations. Not much has changed in 2021. I include all of our consumption data. So although the average flow, if you refer to the document that I have up right now, the average flow isn't much higher compared to previous years. The high flow day is significantly higher. We saw several days exceed the highest day of 2020. And I believe I was here reporting to council quite regularly on my concern over our high water usage. So luckily, with the mild-ish spring or summer, start to summer that we've had, we haven't seen numbers this high yet, but I have a feeling this week we're going to see some pretty staggering low numbers as more and more irrigation picks up. And that's what we consider to be the most significant water use. And if you look, actually, the surprising thing is our low flow day was actually much lower than previous years of last year. So that could reflect that we've actually fixed some leaks and reduced our general water consumption, but then it's in summer, those July, August months, that we see such a high flow days. I have the full list of results in the appendix, but this was just a summary table. And then, yeah, we just talk about the chlorination, which I don't think we need to discuss. Water chemistry, I will touch on this because I mentioned our water treatment plant proposal, and that's something that we are still looking at, although we never did exceed the maximum allowable concentration. We did exceed the aesthetic objective, but only on our backup well. However, we've seen a trend of these climbing on our primary well, and what we've seen in the past with other wells. We don't want to be behind the ball on this one. So we're just trying to stay ahead of it, looking at what treatment we need. And there's another potential that we could get another source that won't be of worse quality, but if we have the treatment in place, we can treat that. And therefore we would be able to use another, the Linwood River Aquifer as our secondary source. So we've been doing increased testing this year. of water chemistry. So we have monthly results for that this year. Other than that, I am obligated by Vancouver Coastal Health to provide this flush message, although we do have corrosion control in our water system. We treat with sodium carbonate, which reduces which adjusts the pH to a neutral level so that our water is not corrosive. However, VCH still recommends that you flush your taps until the water is cold before consuming it. Cross connection control, not much to update on this year. The one big thing was in 2021, we built the backup generator for the well house, which I think was a huge win. And thank you again to council for approving that, because it's shocking how vulnerable we were without that, considering the consumption that we see. Our reservoirs can last us maybe a day, but if we were to lose power for more than a day on one of those high use days, then we would not have drinking water, and we definitely wouldn't have capacity to fight a fire or something like that. So now we are completely resilient. We're not reliant on hydro at the well house, so we will be able to pump water as long as we have access to diesel fuel. And that's pretty much it for that report. So
Any questions?
or other questions?
A lot of graphs.
Yes.
There's no questions, motion received. Got it, seconded by Councilor Noble, any opposed? It carries. Now you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Okay, up next, rec services. Burns. Tom, warm that seat up for you.
You would choose the other one.
Do we think now that it's cooled down outside, that opening windows would be helpful?
I'm not sure. It's so warm out. I should mention how I came from a cold building then.
Cold building, we can afford a cold building.
Yeah. Good evening, council and mayor. Thank you very much for having me to update you on recreation second quarter activities. I think I can speed through this with some highlights, and the big highlight from Q2 is the fact that we no longer have any public health orders. So I feel like I
Motion
can
to celebrate.
now.
Celebrate.
Exactly. So that was definitely our highlight. It revolved, hopefully, the last major pivot that we see. I mean, there's potential to move backwards, obviously, with the seventh wave apparently upon us, but staff is ready to accommodate those sorts of things in a heartbeat. So we have increased staffing, and we opened the doors completely. So we moved away from time slots for the fitness center and access only being if you're registered in a program. So that was fabulous. So we were very excited about that. Fitness programs, we had 120 value-added classes with 983 registrants, which was great. 8 regular fitness classes. We do tend to slow things down in the spring for fitness because usually everybody moves outside. So we did see that. But right after we opened the doors, it was like, where'd everybody go? But there were still 172 participants in those 8 programs, which is awesome. We had a series of special events for the youth this fall or spring, sorry, which was awesome because we are still not seeing the, I guess, flow through the facility that we did pre-pandemic times. But we had laser tag, which we partnered with the library to offer that one, which was awesome. And there were 18 youth that participated. Movie night in the library had 11 participants. Bubble soccer, which we borrowed the equipment from Young Life. We were very grateful for their contribution to that. 25 youth came out for that. The big disappointment, though, was we didn't have any youth come to play dodgeball with the RCMP. So we'll bring that one back for sure. We had a family show up to watch because they thought it would be fun to watch the youth throw balls at the RCMP. But that's okay. Yeah. We had 6,733 fitness patrons in Q2, which is fantastic. National Health and Fitness Day was on Saturday, June the 4th, I believe the date was. And we did a pass promotion and we offered buy a 3-month pass, get the 4th month for free. So we saw a 46% increase in pass sales for our 3-month pass in Q2, which was fabulous. So that was nice. And then of course in Q2, we opened all of our outdoor spaces. So Spray Park opened on Friday, May the 20th. I think all the fields were open by May 24th-ish. I think as Tom alluded to, we definitely had not totally unique, but we had a spring like we haven't had in a long time because there was a lot of snowpack. So we were a little slow on the upstart, but everything, once it got up and going, and everything seems to be going well. I think the ductless air conditioning and heat pump in the rec project is complete. So the rec is now air conditioned. So that is awesome. And then the other project that we had on the go was the accessibility project in conjunction with the library. So the doors have been changed out to the library. They will be accessible next week once the electrical component gets completed, but we're pretty excited about that. The rest of that project will be on hold while Emma and I figure out next steps for the front of the facility. I think the only other thing that I really wanted to touch on was the progress that we've made with the basketball court in Q2 and how grateful I am to Graham Murphy from Murphy Construction for providing his value in kind for this project of upwards of about $30,000 worth of service that he's providing right now. So I think we're moving into next steps, which will be signing some contracts hopefully pretty quickly. We're just compiling some final numbers from Alpine Paving. VCT Fencing has come in. We have seen some increases in costs due to supply chain issues, as well as because of the location at the school. We've had to, instead of going with 8-foot fencing, we'll be going with 12-foot fencing because of the location to roadways and cars and things like that to manage risk and a few things like that. But other than that, I am open to any questions if there are any. Otherwise, I would love for you to receive this information.
Any questions?
Yeah, when I was talking to Chris about the basketball court, excuse me.
Yeah.
She's hoping to be open for September. Is that still on track?
That's the plan. And we may have, that's the plan. The main work will be complete. For September 4th.
Let's go with the plan.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. There might be some equipment delays.
And I know there was a conversation around the clearing, the height and with regards to the hydro lines, that's all been dealt with.
That's been dealt with, yes.
Perfect. Awesome.
All right.
Any other questions? There is screening involved, like a landscaping screening involved in that budget, right? To the fencing, in front of the fencing?
There is, yeah. Yeah, we're gonna have to potentially move some trees as well. So I think we're hoping for a natural landscape screening for starters.
Motion to receive, Councillor Caddick, seconded by Councillor Zank, and opposed, motion carries. Christine, before you go, I was going to mention it in my mayor's report, but since you're here, you can pass it on. Thank you for the work to you and staff on the Canada Day celebrations. I know it was confusing. We didn't know, council didn't give very clear direction. We're feeling our way through it. I think for our first, for that approach, I think it was really good. I think the community, there's a lot of young families, especially well attended by young families. And I think they really appreciated it. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you very
Pass it on
much.
to staff.
That's for Q3.
I know, but I want to catch you and pass it on to staff. And
Yes, thank you very much. We had a lot of fun. It was good. So thank you very much. Have a great evening.
motion to move the fire rescue report till after bylaws. Please, sir.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me and my second quarterly report. For the second quarter, we responded to 72 instances. Call volumes were actually down compared to 2021 second quarterly report. That's going to include April 23 calls, May 24, June 25 calls for and totaling that 72 calls. I actually added grass fires actually to our incident reports as well, just instead of bringing that away from the wildland fires. So you can see that added. Incident percentage types, wires down 4%, public service 5%, alarms 16%, MVIs are 20%, any fire related calls 21%, and medical aids are 33%. Percentages by area, regional district, we are at 13%. Our fire district is 16%. Lowat 34%, and we have VOP at 37%. In our second quarter training, total number of 16 training for 79 hours. Public events, we had 8 public events up to, which is 22 hours. Meetings, 5 meetings, 5.5 hours. And our 72 incidents came up to 666 hours. We did 8 new business application reviews and fire inspections. And we also did 8 public hall tours, 4 hall tours for preschool and the grad parade, wildfire emergency preparedness day. And we assisted the Signal Hill building a fire pit so they can do their cedar art. Membership, we're still sitting at 30, it stands at 35 total. So 33 volunteers with 2 full-time. And then we also have our 2 term fire smart staff and 1 admin assistant. Since Robert left since our last report, and we hired on a captain, full-time captain at the fire hall. We accelerated that just because of his absence, so to assist me. And then we had Paul Stoker, who was the laborer, move up to the coordinator. And then we hired Merrick Ruchnik for the labor, and that was effective May 19th. And currently that is all I have for my report.
Thank you.
Short and sweet.
Any questions? Questions? The 7.5 responders per incident is an interesting number. That's the highest number you've ever had. I don't know if that's a fraction of your membership or.
Yeah, I think we have a keen crew right now, which is good. So having those numbers increase definitely benefits.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Can I get a motion to receive this? Councilor Noble, second by Councilor Zant. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for that, Mr. Adams.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Okay. So we are on to number 13, which is bylaws. First one is business bylaw 855, amendment 934. Ms. Kennedy.
And Mayor and Council. The purpose of this report is to present to council an amendment to business license bylaw number 855/2019, adding a new business license type for special event vendors and making some minor changes and corrections. Staff found there's a need for a business license for special event vendors. Some vendors attend only one event in a season, but currently they are required to obtain a special event business license, which was established for the host of a special event and not for individual vendors. So to encourage small vendors to obtain a business license, staff proposed establishing a new license type and setting the cost at $50. And this would permit vendors to operate at special events in the village throughout the calendar year. For convenience, some other minor amendments have been included. All the changes are shown in red in the consolidated version of the business license bylaw in Schedule B on page 148, or Appendix B at page 148 of the agenda package. Some new definitions were added, mainly to align with the terms used in our zoning bylaw and other policies. Definition of trade contractor was updated. And changes made under Part 8, transfer change of business license. We added clarity to show that a change of ownership or change of principal residence would terminate a business license for bed and breakfast or short-term vacation rental. That was always part of our policy, but wasn't set out directly in the bylaw. Part 14 under street park mobile or temporary vending was renamed mobile commercial vendors and mobile food vendors. The section was reorganized and some terms were updated. The requirement for a mobile vendor to obtain a separate license for each location was changed to require instead a separate license for each mobile store or food truck. And the limit of one mobile vendor per property was removed to align with the current practice of the farmers market. We have more than one food truck operating on the property. Part 15, trade contractor was renamed home occupation, and we added clarification that the trade contractor is a type of home occupation. That's not a change, it's just a matter of explicitly stating it in the bylaw. And also stating that the operational requirements set up in zoning bylaw 832 apply to home occupation. Part 17 was revised to add the new special event vendor business license and to stipulate that the operational requirements of a mobile vendor apply to the special event vendor. As required under section 59 of the community charter, the proposed amendment was advertised in the Peak News magazine on July 7th and 14th, and no comments were received from the public. The recommendation of the report is that council gives first, second, and third readings to the Village of Pemberton Business License Bylaw number 855/2019, Amendment Special Event Vendors Bylaw number 934/2022.
Very much.
Happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Comments? Seeing none, would somebody like to move first, second, and third reading of, I won't read the whole bylaw again. Councillor Caddick, second by Councillor Zan. Oh. Do you have a question, Councillor Zan? Moving in. Okay, moved by Councillor Caddick, second by Councillor Zan. Any further discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next.
The purpose of this report is to present the council an amendment to the fees and charges bylaw number 905/2021 that updates the business license fee schedule and corrects an error in the fee for a special event business license. Earlier during this meeting, council gave first, second, and third readings to the business license bylaw amendment. Subsequently, as business license fees reside in the fees and charges bylaw, it's necessary to amend the fees and charges bylaw by replacing Schedule F business license fees. And for convenience, some other minor amendments were included. Community event business license, the cost was reduced from $150 to $75. A better reflection of what we intend for a not-for-profit organization providing service to the community. The fee for a home occupation business license was added as a separate line. It's not a change again, but it's just noted separately. And an error in the fee for a special event business license, it was incorrectly stated to be $150, has been corrected to read $100. The column showing the business license fees as of January 1st, 2021 was removed as it is no longer relevant. This concludes my report. The recommendation is that council gives first, second, and third readings to Village of Pemberton fees and charges bylaw number 905/2021, amendment business license fees bylaw number 935/2022. I'm happy to answer your questions.
Again, any questions? Somebody like to move first, second, and third reading? Councilor Noble, seconded by Councilor Zant. Any discussion? Opposed? Okay, thank you, Ms. Kennedy. We have two bylaws for adoption. The first one is Village of Pemberton Parks and Public Spaces bylaw 797/2016. Amendment Public Spaces definition bylaw 933/2022. We've seen this and moved first, second, third. Would somebody like to move adoption? Mr. Caddick, seconded by Mr. Zant. Any discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Similarly, we've seen Village of Pemberton and given first, second, and third reading to Village of Pemberton Parking and Traffic Control bylaw 840/2018. Amendment Public Parking Lot bylaw 933. Adoption moved by Councilor Zant, second by Councilor Noble. Any discussion? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, on to 14, which is the mayor's report. A number of things that I wanted to talk about, we kind of covered throughout the course of the afternoon. I do want to report out on some of the items from our regional district meeting from last, I guess, the end of last month in June. Not quite on our doorstep, but it was kind of interesting. We had a delegation, a presentation from the Director of Marketing from Caribou Chilcotin Tourism about an MRDT program. So they're looking pretty seriously at that. We're up in their neck of the woods. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. There was discussion again. There's been a couple applications for special events and some temporary use permits in the Upper Squamish Valley area. And I bring this up because it also resembles some of the issues we had in the Pemberton Valley over the years with folks making application to host events. And without getting into a ton of detail in history, you know, the ALC does permit a certain amount of larger scale events as ancillary activities for agricultural producers. There's been a lot of discussion around some of these applications that have come forward. Are they really related to agriculture? It's a very narrow valley and sound travels a lot, and there's concern that if every property was given X amount of events, that it would be a very noisy and disrupted valley. So the staff is looking at preparing a policy and some zoning regulations around it. And again, I just thought it was interesting because we had very similar conversations, especially with regards to Pemberton Meadows and Area C. There was an agreement. So Area C amenity funds, about just shy of $12,000 were put forward to the Birkenhead Lake Estates area for a water trailer. And this is part of their Fire Smart activities up in that area. Previous recommendations were all endorsed. There was a little more discussion around the development on the Liwat Main Street development. So that's the commercial on ground floor and the affordable housing above, two buildings that I brought forward as part of my report before, right across from the Spirit Circle, I guess you'd say, or the White Church. It was brought forward it was brought back to talk about some of the, not concerns, but items that were brought out, which were mostly around the drainage in the area and Grandmother Slough that has seen a lot of challenges of late. And PVDD is now working with the applicants. They've made some proposals and some suggestions, and they're going to be working with the applicants to look at the drainage a little bit closer. And there's further discussion about how to connect this development with the Friendship Trail. So that'll be acknowledged and looked at as part of the development permit, but that development is going through the steps and moving forward. So this was a fairly big conversation. I reported on this one as well. This is regarding the Furry Creek OCP and zoning amendment. So this is the next stage of development in the Furry Creek area. Without going into too much detail, because I have reported on it, it's 870 dwelling units that are proposed for the development, 120 tourist accommodation units. And this was brought back, the hope was to get, I guess the hope from the applicant was to get this to go to public hearing. And there was still a lot of discussion around this application. Some of the things that were brought back in this rendition as due to board comments were around the village commercial. So the village commercial space has been increased quite substantially. The community center childcare space has been increased. The access rate of the childcare spaces, there's going to be 74 spaces provided. The access rate to those 74 spaces has been accelerated. I mentioned this before too. There's a lot of discussion about fire services down there as it relates to Britannia South, Britannia North, Furry Creek, and all the development that's going on there, and what each area needs to provide, and what as a larger community they want to provide. So that's still being reviewed, but that will be very much be part of the discussion through the development permit process. More information was brought back on transit. We wanted more allowances on that. So the proposal was brought forward to have a private shuttle to go from the development to West Van and connect residents to TransLink. More details around the transit hub and what will be situated there and the size. A little more information on the school site and making sure that's been well identified and committed to. There's a desire from board members to have this be a completely fossil fuel free community, so no natural gas. So that was brought into the conversation, as well as step 3 and 4 building code requirements. Part of what was brought back is also an increase of 200 plots of community gardens over 0.15 hectares. Some shared electric vehicles and e-bikes. Those will be secured through the land development agreement, as will be the affordable housing units. And the affordable housing units, like for board direction, will be integrated into the whole development and not built in one single area. We've got an increased commitment from them for some diverse housing opportunities. And that again will all be secured through the land development agreement, which will provide both the board opportunity to make sure it's providing affordable housing options that it should be. And then a couple more changes were made sort of on the fly over the course of 2 days. There was a few lots put aside. They were, get the square footage now, they're monster lots for like 7,500 square foot homes. So I think there was like 5 or 7, they were founders lots. On our direction, those were removed. We'd like to see, again, a little bit more clarity around the management and number of affordable units. And active transportation, there was a number of questions around that too, because some of the trails identified, it was just unclear to the board of what was identified if the trails that were laid out in the connectivity and trails plan actually allowed for active transportation. Were they wide enough? Would they connect? Because they don't include the actual roads. So it was hard to sort of see that through. So by the end of very long conversations, it was put forward to go to public hearing to get the community reading on this. But there were also comments from the board saying with, for the public hearing, and when it comes forward for third reading, and if they're looking for adoption, that we wanted to see some of that clarity around the active transportation, a little bit more around the transit and the affordable housing. Sophie report was approved. And this is another one I reported on the last meeting. This is regarding some affordable units at the Wedgwoods development. And if you recall, when I reported last time, we wanted to see more security how these units were going to be preserved over time, and they don't become somebody's really nice sewing room or workout room, that they remain affordable in the affordable market. If the provisions are going to be done. So there's some more details brought forward on that, and it was passed, but staff has been, what's been passed is to have staff continue to review the amendment application with the applicants and work with the developer to provide 10 or more non-market lots. So we're looking to increase the number of non-market lots that are being provided as well. And I think from that meeting, Sea to Sky Hospital, Regional Hospital District. Previous report, I told you we had a delegation from BCH looking for some funding or with some funding requests. Those requests were discussed at this past meeting. And although BCH has come out with more modest requests over the last few years, it was nonetheless felt by the board that these requests were still pretty much operational and that these projects should be funded through regular VCH and provincial funds, and that the funds accrued through the Sea to Sky Regional District Hospital District taxation should go towards priorities that are important to our residents. One of those being right now in the midterm, the CT scanner for the Squamish Hospital. So all funding requests to BCH were denied. And also I attended the presentation. I don't know if you guys are connected on for the 2030 games, Indigenous led games presentation. It was very interesting, and I won't go into too much detail, but they're basically at the engagement stage, which is now being extended to us. They're trying to gather as much local information and understanding as possible. They're going to be coming to our farmers market, that sort of thing. Some of the plan is similar to the 2010 games, except the Cypress Mountain element would be moved to Sun Peaks. So it would be Vancouver, Whistler, and Sun Peaks. The key, obviously one of the main principles of this game is that it's Indigenous led, and there's a lot of really good principles around it, including building on the legacies of 2010. So reusing assets, how to build new legacies would be in, affordable housing that could come out of the athletes villages, that sort of thing. There's all those sorts of conversations going on, and that's what they would like to talk to us as part of their engagement. The comment that I brought forward, I wasn't sure it's the right time, but I'm sorry, some of the other goals is that it's a climate positive game. In other words, carbon negative, that emissions would be carbon negative through these games, that it would benefit all communities. And the legacy, of course, would be economic prosperity, but above all, reconciliation. And so when it came to the engagement, I mentioned that many of our residents felt in 2010 Olympics that Pemberton was not left a legacy at all, and did not really benefit from the games. So we felt kind of just on the fringe of things. And the suggestion was that just farmers market and that sort of thing isn't going to be sufficient engagement for our community, and that we would like to have them come present to this council to talk about what their plans are and to talk about how we can make sure that Pemberton has what it needs or wants through this potential game. And that's it. Like I say, Canada Day, I thought went really well. Maxine made some great comments. I thought she spoke really well. And it was just really nice to see a lot of folks and young kids and all ages actually just running around having a good time. And this is our last meeting until August, and this is a special meeting, so I'll say have a good break. And that's my mayor's report.
May I just have one question on your report? The Furry Creek project, is that the First Nations land or is that Furry Creek?
Yeah, it's Furry Creek.
It is it.
And if you recall, they have a whole bunch, there's a whole bunch of unzoned lands
Above it, yeah.
right? Which was it's a very weird new situation for me anyway. It was very weird. And so they came to the board a couple of years ago and said, well, we'd like to focus the development on the lower part of the development of the site. And in return, or however you want to put it, we don't want those unzoned. And so they're looking perhaps for some more density and some change to the original plan, and say, okay, the upper part will just say, we'll leave that natural.
Okay. And the reason I bring it up because, excuse me, I look at Furry Creek, we're talking 500 plus. We're looking at the Canny Beach, 800 plus. We're looking at the First Nations, I think that's 300 plus. We're up to 1,400 plus residents. I'm sure the board has talked about this. What's happening with traffic?
Well, and actually your math is off. It's 870 units at Furry.
Oh, it is.
I build out Britannia South could represent over 2,000 residents.
Oh, my gosh.
And then, so your map is actually a little short, but yes, the board has brought it up with every developer, and that's why we're so strong on the transit hub, on the shared vehicles, on the employment lands within, trying to create those complete developments so that people aren't hopping on that highway to go get milk or anything else, that they're only getting on the highway when they need to. But there's no question it's going to represent a significant change to traffic flow down the south part of the highway, and that's why we're on, whatever we can. And obviously, everything gets a traffic study done with it, but it's a big part of the conversation. Yes.
I wonder if that conversation can also go up to 2030 bid.
Yeah.
Because we know what the highway's like already, especially in those choke points. So anyway, I just wanted to ask that question. It'd be a tough one.
Any council reports? Go ahead.
Myself and Ms. Kennedy attended the Community Wildfire Resiliency Committee. I don't know if you want to give a report or can you back me up on it? It was a good meeting and we keep it to an hour. One of the issues they're looking at within the village of Pemberton, obviously working with Acting Chief Cam, is water sources and capacity other than what we have available in the town. So if there's a wildfire, they don't want to run our reservoirs dry. So where can they pull water from? They're also working with water rights agreements with people up in the meadows. And there's issues always when people have to give up their water rights. So, but they are working with that. They've got 700 hours work time available for fuel management work, and they're working towards getting that done. We had the consultants up and they were walking most of the areas to see what needed to be done, and we're pleased with what's happened so far. What they're looking at doing, excuse me, is introducing with the OCP review where any trail developments on new subdivisions can be made to become fire breaks. And I think they're considering wide enough so fire equipment can get in on. So I thought that was a good note, and so that we bringing that forward to potentially know OCP review. The other thing that I was interested to hear, and people might want to listen to this one, is if people on their homes in the community do a wildfire resiliency inspection, it's about a 20-page report, but insurance companies, if you're successful, are offering a 5 to 15% discount. So I thought so mine's getting done quickly. I put it down. The other thing that I brought up at the meeting, it's always been on my mind with the addresses here in our community. If there's an evacuation, what happens, because a lot of units have suites? What identifies a house that has a suite? So I asked that question and the fire department responded that on any house that has to be evacuated, they will automatically make sure they go around the house to identify if there's any other access in suites. So that's been looked after. There's some new funding coming out October 1st. The funding from last year was 150,000. October 1st is going up to 200,000, and that'll last for 2 more years. So that's a substantial amount of money to look after that. So they are looking at maybe an asset purchase or two, and it could employ up to 4 to 5 people over that time period. So they're really getting busy with it. One of the concerns that was brought up is concerning CN and hydros right of ways. There's been a lot of lack of fuel management and lack of comments when they've been approached to do something about it. So I asked if they had pictures or comments, if they could have it to us for our UBCM meeting, because normally we meet with Hydro and CN, but I'm sure any one of us would be happy to just say, hey, what are you doing there? So, and that's it for that committee meeting. And just a reminder that Thursday night at 7 o'clock, if you're looking for a good time, Pemberton Valley Diking District's EGM, And it's going to be held at 7 o'clock at the community center. And they'll be electing 2 new people for going forward to the board of directors. And that's it for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. The council reports? Seeing none, we're on to correspondence for action. We have one from Brenda McLeod regarding safety concerns on the Friendship Trail. Portion is in the regional district, so the recommendation is that council direct staff to forward the correspondence to the SLRB. You'd like to make that motion? Councilor Craddock, second by Councilor Zant. Any discussion? Any opposed? Carries. There are 13 items correspondence for information. Would anybody like to pull any of them? A lot of them on UBCM resolutions that we'll see in the fall.
Second.
Second by Councilor Zant. Any opposed? Motion carries. Decision on late business. Late business, notice of motion. Question period. The regular council meeting is now open for questions from the public. Please be reminded that only questions directly related to items discussed during this meeting are permitted. If any members of the public attending via Zoom webinar wish to ask a question, please click the raise hand feature. This will notify staff that you would like to ask a question, and they will unmute your microphone when it is your turn to speak. Are there any questions? Start with the room. How about the virtual?
No question.
Okay, thank you. Then a motion to go back in camera, please. Councilor Craddock, second by Councilor Noble. Any opposed? Okay.